3, 2, 1.
Well, hey there, guys, gals, non-binary pals. Welcome back to the SPL Season 9 Phase 1 Seeding LAN Day 2. It's the finals, all powered by Prime Gaming. Now, again, for those of you out there who are not a Prime Gaming subscriber, well, you should change that, just because it's going to open up so much. It's the most powerful membership service that there is in the world. You need to know that what you're going to get out of this is not just the typical delivery that you're going to get, the free delivery, as well as the music, movies, and all the other things that you get with a Prime membership, but also a ton of exclusive content, free games, a free Twitch sub that you get to use once every month, as well as seasonal discounts and other surprise perks. And again, if you are a Prime Gaming subscriber, then one, congratulations, good job. You're already on the step to the right track. But if you're not utilizing those things, you gotta fix that, and you gotta do it as fast as possible. And so I think for all of you out there who are already Prime Gaming subscribers, make sure that you get on those fantastic deals while you can. And thanks again to Prime Gaming for powering the SPL so far this year. My name's Gormizer. Joining me on the desk is going to be Trelly this time around. After a fun cast, a fun couple of sets, or games, I guess. It was only the one set.
Multiple games.
Yeah, there we go. You got it right. We'll be going into the finals for this weekend. Now, for those of you who are just tuning in or who have maybe not paid as much attention for the weekend, top 4 teams from the SPL after Phase 1 came into play. It was 1 versus 4. That was yesterday, Dragons Titans, and then 2 versus 3, Bolts Warriors. We just watched the Warriors take down the Titans in a 3-1, and we're about to watch the finals that there are, the Dragons versus the Bolts. Matchup that just feels like just history at this point. It always happens. They're magnetized to each other for whatever reason. It always ends up being the same way. And Trelly, we got to look at these two teams as the powerhouses that they are. They become in, they're the first and second seed for the SPL after Phase 1. And a lot of that came down to like small matchups. I think, certain wins over certain teams that really just slightly elevate you to where you need to go to. And the Dragons will be the team that we look at first. 2 impact players. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday, watching the way this team played and how they come into today. I think a lot needs to be looked at specifically first into the solo lane. Fine, okay. It just drives this team forward.
Yeah, he's been looking very solid, even going to these not-so-meta picks, trying to bring, like, the King Arthurs back, the Odins, things of that nature, where it's not these auto-attack warriors so much, it's these ability-based bluestone warriors, and then, obviously, everyone who's playing solo lane has to have a Kalina in the arsenal because she is just so potent as well, but just been looking extremely dominant, never really losing lane pressure, even when jungles are showing face in that solo lane. The Jade Dragons like to still play off this lane specifically because Final K can find that pressure after the fact. Once you get a gank, what are they doing with it? Final K usually does a whole lot.
And this is a matchup I personally think today is going to be very interesting in the solo lane, something that I don't admittedly think I get to say too often, because Fine OK, someone that over the years, whether you watch his streams, watch his YouTube content, or if you've just been a Dragons fan, prior to that Ghost Gaming fan, or whatever team Fine OK was on fan, he has always had this presence in solo lane. And he's going up against Haddix, who I think last year and the year before that really did get to showcase, or sorry, last year, and so far this year, has really been able to showcase what that solo lane can bring. And I think that as a frontliner, Fine OK does keep things incredibly interesting. Also, 12.0 KDA is written down there at the bottom. I imagine that has to be for this weekend. But even still, that's a ridiculous number to have next to your name. And so I think well earned. And this is the thing that keeps things, I want to say, even more interesting to me. Because Fine OK, the solo lane, we've seen a lot of pressure over there, a lot of those highlights with ganks from Sam. It's the other side of the map that I think is very interesting. And now normally this is where we have a conversation about frontliners. We go into PBM and we hark on that as hard as possible. But it's actually PandaCat that I think has been, we kind of, clowned him a little bit a few times because, like, admittedly, he played a lot of Ullr, And when he wasn't playing Uller prior to the weeks where maybe some changes happened, he was playing Medusa, and that was it. It did not shift anywhere else. But it has been a very impactful, I think, set of weeks here from Panda Cat.
When you said we were going to clown him, I thought you meant when he died to Gold Fury.
He did die to a Gold Fury.
Also, yes, he's been looking really solid. Most of these ADC players, more often than not, make their home right about the tower line. They trade some auto attacks. That's pretty much the brunt of their aggression until later stages of the game. Panda Cat, however, has been trying to find these 1v1s no matter who he's up against, no matter what the matchup is. He's trying to take these 1v1 fights in that lane and always looking very dominant. I mean, just up recently, you know, taking those solo kills into Zap, always being extremely aggressive in this lane. Sure, who's playing on her right now? I mean, that's like the best 1v1 pick in the lane specifically. Yeah. You're only picking that because you want to get aggressive, and that's when you know, I mean, in your head, I'm the better ADC. I want to get in and I want to fight. That's usually the name of the game, and Panda Cat is not afraid to take those fights.
And I think it was actually this fight. I remember we were talking about this one pretty much in depth. The way that the spread happened for the Titans, and a lot of it is bought by the Dragons front line, made it, I think, a little easier for the carries to capitalize on. But I mean, look at the way that this fight just evolves, the aggression, I think, that comes through, and being able to find it. You know, we talk about Jing Wei lately. There's had to be the conversation about some of those crits, and some of the damage I just saw there was absolutely insane. I think that Panda Cat has been able to bring to the table. And so it has been a fun few games to watch yesterday from the Dragons. Did take them 4, though, and that's something maybe worth mentioning. And overall, the Titans being able to find game number 2. And I think that's the biggest thing to maybe talk about here, is we do have Panda Cat standing by before this set just to see what's going through the minds of the Dragons. I know I did see you guys in the break room very relaxed, even in the presence of Bera. So it was okay, like with just that guy there, it was fine. Well, I saw when the rest of the bolts came, you know, game faces were on. But I guess looking at this set, you guys almost always seem to match up against the bolts. I believe you beat them a few weeks ago when you played them in Phase 1 as well. It was a 2-0. So what's the mentality for the team going into this set?
Just another day.
Just another day?
Yeah, just another day. I don't think the Bolts have beaten us yet at any of these events. I think we're like 6-0 against them literally every time we play them. So I think it'd be an easy set.
Just keeping it rolling the exact same way.
Keeping it 100, keeping it a buck.
Yesterday, you guys go 4 against the Titans, right? Game 2 was the only one that was like a slip up, if you want to call it that. What goes wrong in Game 2, and what kind of things did you learn from that set that you can bring into today?
I think Titans' name of the game was pressure, like a lot of pressure. Obviously, they're playing like Jorms and stuff. We gave me Mojo every game, so inherently you're going to be kind of falling behind quite early, which makes it up to the Titans to kind of throw the leads that you're giving them. You know, you're putting yourself in a spot where the other team has to make mistakes to lose, and you have to like capitalize on them right away. And I think they had a really good, clean game too. Pressure every lane. I'm setting my tower, no buffs, no nothing, 2 levels behind, just waiting for the next one. But no, yeah, I think I did learn a little bit from that set. I'm obviously not going to say what, because I think the competitors are watching me right now, so you know they would love to know that. But no, I mean it was a good set. I think the Titans, you know, I think they played all right, and I'm happy we came out on top.
Well, yesterday you get the win. I'm sure you have at least an interesting show in store for us. But like you said, the matchup historically has gone your favor. So good luck in your games, man. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you one more time, and of course the fun it is, Trelly, of being able to watch these two. It was one thing I was going to end up mentioning it, but realistically, like, almost every matchup in this one feels like it is just so interesting to dive into. I think, you know, when you look at the carries, you look at Panda, you look at versus Bera, then you go into the supports, and you've got PBM and the tenure, the history that he brings, and then sometimes just the pop-off moments. There's so much, I think, that you can highlight here. We will be switching over conversations more about the bolts here. So we did a nice look into specifically what the Dragons can bring. You have to look same place to the solo lane. What Haddix is able to bring to the table for this squad. I'm going to mention this one before I let you have the floor, and that is that he had the highest KDA through Phase 1 of any player. So you know he's getting his kills, you know he's getting hands-on. And it's been interesting lately, Trelly, because the highlight shows it maybe better than I could explain it. He hasn't been playing your solo laner. He was playing Horus.
Yeah, and an interesting build at that. The Golden Blade Horus was obviously a treat to watch, but still looking so solid on any pick, really. I mean, you said it yourself, pretty much carrying the Fantasy League. Haddix has been extremely prevalent pretty much in every match he plays, even if the team loses, which they didn't lose much, but when they did, Haddix was still looking very solid, holding his own, so to speak. So this roster as a whole, I think, really has come together since Lasper was able to get on these these picks that he likes to play more so often than not. I think they were trying to adapt to the meta a little bit too much, putting him on these Guardian jungles, and now that he's been able to come out swinging, hi-rez has still been looking super solid and just really dominating the map.
And, you know, when you get a bunch of highlights and he just looks good in every single one of them, yeah, you have to imagine hi-rez is a huge power player for them. It was such an interesting turmoil. You go back, Season 7, Renegades, most of the roster that became the Bolts at the time is hanging out, trying to figure things out. You know, Jake's first year doesn't necessarily maybe go as cleanly for him early on. They have some solo issues in the sense that it just feels like they didn't know who they wanted when they wanted. I believe it was Solo or Troll at first, and then later on that year, Variety ended up playing with them. And it was hi-rez's pickup at Season 7 that solidified this team. Staying the same so far, and it has looked really good because of this guy right there on your screen. hi-rez has definitely brought a flavor to this team that I'm a big fan of, and it makes it a lot of fun to watch. But on the other side of it, someone who's been playing the game longer than maybe some of those dudes have been alive in the booth. That's just a joke because it's funny to rip on Bera. He's been killing it lately. I mean, you go through any SMITE year, and you're bound to see one of two Beras. You're going to see the Bera that is, you know, in a 6th place team, hasn't necessarily been doing too well, whether it's him or the team as a whole that isn't clicking, or you're going to see the Bera that I think we've seen the last couple of weeks, which is the one that is saving games, killing people left and right, absolutely popping off. It feels like he's right back up there at the top.
Yeah, when I think of Barracuda, I think he's the picture of ADC consistency. You can always look to him in that lane if you're having a rough game and say, wait, our ADC's doing fine, we're still in this. Like, even if we're behind, Barra's usually even or has a small lead to himself. He's rarely going to get soloed. He's rarely going to get ganked and actually find a death. He just is always on point, and I think that's what you really need from an ADC player right now in this sort of meta where duo is sort of just left on an island, right? Where most of these mid 3v3s or solo ganks are happening, and you just sort of trust that your hunter is over there doing the right thing, but you can't really tell. You're just like, you know, he's on Jingwei. Sure, he'll fly in and help us out at one point, but right now we're going to fend for ourselves. But whenever Bera does fly in, it's more often than not it is on the Jingwei, just because he plays that character a lot. Yeah, he almost always makes these massive rotations. He's nice and farmed and just helps out the squad. The picture of consistency for me in an ADC.
I think that it is, again, just a treat always to watch him. I'm a little nervous now, though, because now that I think about it, it's very fun. You call Zapman and Bera, the old men of SMITE. When aggro hit 30, he got thrown onto the list of people oh, yeah, old guy in SMITE. They're only a couple years older than me. I'm turning 29 later this year. I'm getting there, Trelly. I'm going to be the old man.
Myth calls me old. I'm 24, so
I also... And Myth's 23?
Yeah.
I think he's turning 24 Wednesday.
He's
By the way, make sure you tag Mifflin on Wednesday, this upcoming Wednesday, and harass him with a bunch of happy birthdays. I don't know if he likes it or not. So if he likes it, he's going to thumbs up because a lot of interactions. If he doesn't, it's funny. So either way, it's a big win. Speaking of Mifflin, not only is his birthday coming up, I also believe I literally watched him from that seat not too long ago, Trelly, stand up and then walk down the hall to just ambush a player in the player booth. So we got an interview with him. I have no idea what to expect, but I guess we can watch it.
So as you can see, we're finished up on the desk here, and I'll be honest with you guys at home. I'm a little bit, I'm trepidatious. I'm worried about this mini interview segment because they're clearly already in the booths. They're ready to play. These guys, it's grand finals. They're going to get mad. But Jordan comes at me with a tiny mic, and I know what my responsibilities are. And it's to interview, my calling in life. So, which one of these two teams do I want to like me less? Would I go into the Jade Dragons booth and make an enemy of PBM? He's got 22,000 followers on Twitter. I'm not sure I'm going to do that. Do I go into the Bolts booth and make enemies of the Olympus Bolts? I think Bera's got 36,000. So let's go ahead and get my name in the most people's mouths. Olympus Bolts.
Oh, hello.
How is it, guys? How are you guys feeling about today's matchup?
Very nervous. We're freaking out.
I can tell. I'm looking at Jake right now, and he is. Well, we can't see under the table, but he is shaking, not in his boots. Yeah. Are you concerned at all that maybe Jake's nerves are going to affect the play on field?
Yeah. We're all, like I said, we're all just freaking out, insanely nervous about today. Today's a very important day for us, and if we lose, you don't want to know what happens to us. Yeah.
So I've asked this side of the table how they feel. Everybody's saying they're a little bit nervous, but I've had a couple of opportunities to talk to Giga Chad hi-rez, and not once has he been concerned about anything in his life. So, is that true? Are you also worried about your matchup today?
You know, there's my favorite streamer on the other team. He's pretty, I look over across at him and it's kind of intimidating sometimes, but, I watch his YouTube videos, so I know what to play. I know what's good in the meta now, so I'll be fine.
Okay, it seems FineOK has been giving away too many of his secrets, his competitive trade secrets, on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/FineOK, I believe. Just Google Alex Fonso. He's pretty smart. He's pretty famous. Ven, where'd you get this keyboard, bud?
Chop Keys Tech on Twitter.
That's pretty cool. Do you have a name for it?
No. The keyboard. The V-board.
The V-board. I like it. The Olympus Bolts seem to be playing with some confidence. One last question. I've talked to everybody except for Lasbra because I saved the best for last. Obviously, every team only as good as their jungler.
Best for last.
How do you feel about people who eat mint chocolate chip ice cream?
Bro, I eat that so often.
Same.
I get the Yasu protein
Thank
ice
you.
cream. That's good.
Protein ice cream. Oh my God.
There's only 5 grams in it, but better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Fair enough. You're on the Lasbra, letting you know, if you enjoy mint chocolate chip, don't feel bad about it, even though everyone will bully you for some reason.
I don't know. I don't know what I expected, man. I love it though. I think getting a good glimpse into the way the Bolts are hanging out prior to the set, and that Lasbra is eating some protein mint chocolate chip ice cream now. And now, if you want to look like Lasbra, there's the first step.
Yeah, find some
Eat
ice
like
cream,
Lasbra.
put some protein powder in it.
I'm assuming it's like the brands that have I don't think he's dumping protein powder in his ice cream.
Oh.
Do people do that?
I can assure you they do. That's what I assume. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. He's
I don't know. Maybe it does. Wait, let's go into the macros and the micros of what Lasbra is eating on a day-to-day basis and how it affects his competitive streak.
Well, I mean,
do you think having bigger arms for Lasbra is enhancing or detracting from his jungle play? Because that's more mass to move on your arm for Mouse.
it's positive that just affects his mental game. Whenever you're in the gym, your mental's feeling better. Then you can game harder, knowing, hey, I'm more jacked than the other team. At least that's got to be the.
They might beat me here, but then I'll beat them afterward. What are they gonna do?
Look at them shaking loose. They don't look nervous at all. They were lying in that interview. They look pumped.
Oh no, they're shaking loose because of all the nerves. That's exactly what it is. So you have to read into it. No, I think it's a fun set. They got the V board, everything that's going in there, and of course, FineOK giving way too many strats over with his tier lists and what have you all over on his YouTube channel. So something that Haddix has been studying religiously to make sure it goes his way. And just a fun interview for Mifflin. It's going to be picks and bans, though, soon here for game number 1. Dragons will be your first pick team over the Bolts. And that makes things all sorts of fun. So lately, and you know what? I can go over, see Phase 1, bans versus the Bolts, and you can see the ones from yesterday down at the bottom stream. But 9 bans, mostly. A lot of Nox, a lot of Daji. A little bit of Zeus here and there. And so far, we're getting a few of those. The E-set, though, is making its way up there. Artio, one of the most banned gods, up against the Dragons, as well as things like the Habwa, the Thoth, the Daji also kind of overlapping a little bit.
No shot. The Horus just took a ban.
Wow. That's Haddix the Lightning Rod.
Yeah, I mean, that's Haddix studying FineOK's tier list and then FineOK studying Haddix's games and saying, I don't want to deal with
Yeah,
the
you
Horus.
might watch my YouTube, but I watch what you did yesterday.
And he just says, you know what, there's going to be a lot of pressure. I don't want to deal with the global presence. I don't lane against Horus too often. And, it could also be that flex pick into the support as well. Awesome Jake probably knows how to pilot the Horus as well. And it looks like Athena will be the last ban, though. So trying to deal with some of that global presence as well, with Horus and Athena both being taken away here. That does mean the Nox is open. But for the Jade Dragons, there's a few things open as well. It really just depends. Are you trying to focus right now on getting Sam for soccer on something comfortable? He has more eclectic picks in his jungle arsenal. He likes to not so much pick at first unless something like, Daji, for example, gets up. Maybe one of these meta junglers. But right now, it looks like it's going to be Uller. And more often than not, that does go the way of Panda Cat. But we've seen Pagon pilot it as well. So not quite sure where it's going. We can just hold our breath on that one.
Yeah, they've played this god a lot, 6 times throughout a lot of that through Phase 1, and I believe 5 of those went over to Panda Cat, and 1 went over to Pagon, but that's just because Pagon likes to play all sorts of different things. We got Susano mid, I believe, yesterday, almost immediately. A lot of Thoth as well. that was picked up there for them. So something interesting always happening for the Dragons at any given time. You had mentioned, though, the Athena ban, and that seems like something that is only going to happen against the Dragons right now. Sam has been playing that a lot, and it has been a facilitator. Go back to watch those FineOK clips from a few minutes ago when we were talking about him, and there's a lot of Athena taunts at the beginning of the first few, so it makes sense to try and ban that. In response to the Uller, and in the conversation of mages playing support, Nox gets locked in. The other side, the support we've seen a lot for the Dragons yesterday, was that Baron Samedi. And something that we saw impactful in games 2 and 4 for the Dragons, once for the Titans and then once for the Dragons themselves, I think Sam went 10 and 2 on it, is that Fenrir. And it's locked in early enough, but with the Nox next to it, Trelly, it kind of feels like that's probably going to Lasbra.
Yeah, it looks like right now they already have a ton of beads burners on the side of the bolts, and if you are on this Uller, you're going to have to use that beads every time. No sort of CC immunity. There's only one pick, and pretty much they've vastly dealt with it a little bit. Obviously, Uller has some avenues you can axe out the Brutalize. Not when you're under a silence, though. We'll have to see exactly how they are able to play this, but now the Jade Dragons can answer back. Geb counters both of those characters. Stone Shield, a very smart tool against Ragnarok and the Shadow Lock from Nox. The question is, does PBM want to play back? He usually likes to be more on these aggressive characters where he can get in the fight, really set up as much as possible. Geb sort of does that, but at level 12 when you get Blink, you're not starting Blink into that comp. You need Beat, so I'm not sure if Mike is going to want to limit himself to that movement.
That weird balance of, well, my Stone Shield can save you, but if I get silenced or stunned, it's not saving me. So it's like somebody's got to find the balancing point for that. We'll see if that ends up coming into the equation. Gilgamesh locked in. And the Geb, you called it, and maybe willed it into existence. I was going to make a rock joke and source of puns. I did way more geology than I probably should have as a computer science major, but he's locked in here, and something that he's going to get to bring to the table. The ult changes that we talk about from months ago, I still think something that is very prevalent with this pick, although he hasn't fallen off since then. The Gilgamesh is interesting to me, Trelly, though, because he's been back and forth. Even the set, we saw him last set, didn't really stand out for what he's capable of.
Yeah, it really just depends on if he can get off to an early start. Obviously, taking his itemization has taken a few hits here, the Berserker Shield and the Shogun Shield. Okay, so Haddix definitely was watching the tier list because FineOK also likes this King Arthur, but Haddix also a premier King Arthur player as well, so
now,
it looks like we might be able to see it.
Would you say that was it one of your tier lists, say, Trelly, that we could find on youtube.com/SmitePro, or one of FineOK's own tier lists here?
It could have
maybe
been
a little bit of both.
Yeah, I remember specifically taking PBM for the support tier list, so unfortunately we didn't get to see.
Well, we can pretend. Hey, go look very deep in the YouTube.
Yeah, you'll find it
You'll
eventually.
find something. Just watch every video that's there.
Yeah, just
Wink.
keep scrolling through. Eventually you will find it. But I'm not... the Gilgamesh has some solid matchups early on, and I think matches that pressure of Fenrir. But we've also seen Gilgamesh in the solo lane. It really just depends on what you're trying to itemize and where you're trying to put that aggression. Right now, I don't imagine FineOK going to the Gilgamesh, but maybe just holding on to that, that possibility could be something they're going for. The Bolts, they're none the wiser. They're going to ban that Kakol, and they don't really care if that's going to be a solo lane. They're just going to say, that's probably Samber Soccer on that Gilgamesh.
Well, for those of you who are having war flashbacks to the beginning of Season 8 last year, where it was just King Arthur and Kakol in almost every single game over there in solo lane, the Bolts save you this time around. The Kakolin's gone, as is the Cthulhu. Now, this is another thing that's really fun to look at, just because I have them up, Trelly. Gilgamesh was the most played god in Season 8. And reminder, I don't think he was not there the entire time. So getting something like that is a massive achievement for him. 141 games played last year. He wins about 80 of them, so doing a little better than 50% was that, probably approaching the 60s. And that's something that maybe the Dragons have going for them. Just a fun little look towards the way their draft is looking, or would have looked, I guess, last year. They ban out the Oleron, and the Cthulhu joins the Kakulin from the Bolts to try and limit that solo lane matchup. And this is where things always get very interesting. You can tell that the Dragons have a specific look over towards the duo lane right now, trying to limit Barracuda specifically. And those other bans, not only are they FineOK specific, but realistically it feels like that is give Haddix as much control as possible.
Yeah, making sure that there's no sort of counter pressure, as well as a massive team fight ultimate with Descent into Madness. Probably a good idea by the Bolts. King Arthur, one of those lane bullies that does not want to go into the later stage of the game behind. There's some characters that don't hate it. You can just say, hey, don't go for my blue buff. It doesn't matter if I'm getting invaded, that sort of thing. King Arthur is not that. Any sort of cripple is really going to shut down his kick, as we see Artemis is going to be locked in here. I heard the boar, and I was like, wait, what pick is that again? And then just the Artemis is going to be there. So look at all the beads burners on the Olympus bolts. They're going to have a ton of CC. They realize there's a Geb. They realize there's a stone shield, and they're like, you only get one of those. We're going to continuously stack the chain CC here.
And the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Oh, and guess what? There's another after. Yeah, that's going to be a lot to handle here for the Dragons. It's going to be not very surprising if there's 5 beads at the beginning of the game. Artemis, though, and we saw this a little bit yesterday, the Bolts versus the Warriors in Game 1. Barra played this pick. Didn't have too much to say in the first 17-ish minutes before things really popped off. And there were moments where it got bullied, I think, a little bit by the Warriors, where they were able to capitalize on the fact, like, oh, you're super immobile, we're going to get your beads, get your trap, get your ult, and get your Aegis. But the few times late game that didn't happen before a fight, the Bolts absolutely ran the show. So something the Dragons might need to be worried about. Zhang Kui, which feels like a Dragons special, specifically. Last year, we would have talked a little bit about, oh, it could be Hurry, could be Fine OK. Now, especially with an Uller and an Amuzen Cobb beside it, that's a Fine OK pick, along with the Amuzen Cobb and the Uller, kind of flexible for which one goes to Pagon.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because we've already touched on the fact that the Bolts have a lot of CC. With Lasbra on this, I mean, I guess it's probably Lasbra on the Fenrir. So with Lasbra on this Fenrir and the Ragnarok, it's going to be very difficult to try and survive on this Zhang. There's no way you can afford to get teleport. You have to make sure those purification beads are up, but that's only going to save you from one Ragnarok, and then Lasbra can obviously come back around. So I think Fine OK putting himself in a position where probably going to get a little bit of focus thrown his way, but you have 2 ADCs on the other side of the map that can pretty much flourish if Lasbra is only in that solo lane. So taking some of that pressure over into himself and saying, you guys better hard carry because I'm going to eating the full brunt of this CC at least early on.
It's going to be fun to watch this one. Poseidon has been, I want to word it as surprising for me to see as often as we Poseidon hadn't done too well over the last few years. And admittedly, up to this point, hasn't necessarily done too well this year either. He's got 2 wins total. Both of those were for the Bolts, so maybe that's something in their favor. And then yesterday, he picked up another one. So, 2 across the first 4 weeks of Phase 1, and then 3 and 4 picked up by the Bolts yesterday. But I will maybe throw it under the bus a little bit here, Trelly. It didn't do too well in the first 20-ish minutes of the game. It wasn't until some of those late game Krakens that his damage numbers hopped up and that he, as a god, looked really solid.
Yeah, I'm running the numbers here, and it seems like the Bolts have a lot of beads burners, meaning most people are going to start beads at level 1, and to level 12 will have no sort of Aegis. That's when Poseidon's going to shine. Every single Kraken, you're going to get the full brunt of that damage. Towards the later stages of the game, there's going to be a few different immunities that you have to worry about, but forcing so many people into beads probably means you're going to get value out of that Kraken more often than not. But you got to land the Kraken to make sure that happens.
It's got to connect first before anything can shake up. It is another interesting point because, yesterday, I'm talking about the Bolts and the Warriors and like 16 minutes of no team fights that really break out between them. This is like the opposite of that matchup, right? Like both of these teams are very scrappy and will fight sometimes over nothing. They just want to fight. And unfortunately for the Bolts, most of the time in their history, that has matched over towards the Dragons. But it does tend to be bloody. I think earlier, I can't remember if it was Mifflin had said something about wouldn't be surprised if this went 4 or 5 games, but they would all be very fast games because that's just how these teams play against each other and what they do. I guess we'll see what kind of game we are in for here in game number 1 as we go over to Dave and Mifflin to take us through Dragons v Bolts.
2 teams remain, 2 seeds remain. Dave and Miff, I thought you were going to leave me hanging for a second there. On the final set of the weekend here, as we are fighting over first seed in SMITE Masters coming up in just a couple of weeks.
I'm never washing this hands.
What, the one you just fist bumped or
No,
the other
one?
What do you mean? You're washing the one you just fist bumped immediately, I have to imagine, when you get home, right?
No.
Well, now go sprinting away because Panda Cat is going to allow us to take a breather immediately upon entering game number 1. I want to start off with some fun that we've got over in the solo lane here, Miff, and it's the Zhang Kui for the Jade Dragons. Feels very Fine OK-y. I think once we saw the Hunters locked in and then the Zhang Kui became a little bit more obvious that it was going to be solo for Final K. Up against Haddix on the King Arthur. What do you think about the matchup there in solo?
Well, it's a discussion about like the nature of laning phase in Smite. Because the laning phase is so short
we
and you're
could go
able
on
to
for
rotate
hours.
into these team fights so early, I'm not sure that this matchup is going to give or be given enough breath to really show us what it could look like.
So
but
ghastly.
the Zhonghui will have the sustained advantage, should be able to hang out in lane a little bit more consistently. That said, Haddix is allowed to use his HP as a resource more often because he goes towards teleport in that first slot. So potential, I suppose, once they take over to level 5 for some action, but until then, I'm expecting a quiet solo lane.
It'll be more about the rotations, as you point out there, Myth. Though you were excited during picks and bans, maybe for the Jade Dragons, about this Geb pick. I think notably up against the Nox and at the time, just those two between the Nox and the Fenrir that you were pretty excited about. You think Mike has a big role to play here in Game 1?
I think so, and it's not just those two picks. He's also got a very good matchup up against Barracuda on this Artemis. The thing is, you don't want to use Stone Shield to immune the stun from Tusky unless you're quick enough. Generally, you want to wait till afterward because Artemis's kit is so flow state as Pagon just does it to Ven in mid on his own. I guess that's why he picked the Uller so early. Yeah, I was going to say wait till the trap, and then you can use Stone Shield for that, and you're muting all the CC, but Pagon, he gets things started early.
And that doesn't happen often, Myth. I mean, just as you and I were talking
it does for
about...
Pagon.
Yeah, I suppose for Pagon it does. But just individual solo kills, especially at the SPL level, with the way the laning phase, as we've talked about, sometimes goes, you're hanging out and farming, hoping for a gank to get something started. But we always talk about early pressure potential on a pick like an Uller. And Pagon's so talented at this pick. We might be in a world now, Myth, where if an Uller gets locked in, Panicat may have to just take the back seat on this pick.
He does not like hearing that, I'm sure.
Right, unfortunately, but when Pagon's starting things off with first blood, I don't know how you're taking it away.
Yeah, it takes away Ven's beads as well, so now Ven's susceptible to the exact same thing again as we get a chance to look back. Leap lands, blue stones procced, the axe going to be immediately afterward. Yeah, that's as simple as it gets. Ven just too far forward, did not realize how much wave pressure he lost and loses his life for his effort as well. 100 seconds left until that CC immunity becomes available. It could just happen again, and it'll be even easier this time.
Yep. Well, the good news is for Ven, first blood isn't necessarily back-breaking over in mid lane, so early pressure to Pagon, but doesn't necessarily take over the lane just yet. Ven will have that Kraken. Pagon has beads and has the ability to jump out of the Whirlpool once you use those beads. So outside of that, maybe the Kraken will find some value for Ven later on in the laning phase. Lasper has pulled a slight lead over Sanford, and it is slight, maybe about half a level. But hitting that level 5 mark as early as possible on this Fenrir is going to be solid for Lasbra. Because you talk about where the Olympus Bolts have found their pressure, found their success recently, it's stuff like this. Lasbra getting active very early in the game. And the Olympus Bolts have found their first kill.
Yeah, Panda, very greedy with his beads there, just holds on to him for much too long. If he immediately beads the Shadow Lock, I'm pretty certain he walks out of there with his life. Perhaps concerned about the follow-up CC from Barracuda, or maybe the trap like we were talking about a little bit earlier, that chain CC potential, but just did not have enough HP to make that decision, and instead dies to the rotation of Lasbra, who is able to tick over towards level 5. That said, in holding on to the beads, he doesn't have to worry about that Ragnarok.
Pagon uses the beads because of the Ragnarok. Early pressure now from Lasbra as a kill and a set of burnt beads over in mid. Although, is it a set or is it just one bead?
It's purification beads, but it is a singular bead in the icon. You know, maybe that's
like, is it a set of beads that just got burnt?
It's, I mean, yeah, it has to be. There's an S on the end there.
Oh, yeah, I guess we're relying on the picture or the term. We'll stick with set of beads because that's
I suppose you have to trust your own eyes. It's beads.
Yeah, I don't trust my own eyes with much. I do trust my own eyes that Final K has won this trade over Haddix, uses the ult. Haddix dashes away from it, so a bit of early pressure over to the Zhonghui. Haddix goes ahead and picks up that chalice, and now we'll be able to itemize a little bit more effectively, teleport to get back to lane.
Final K and using the ultimate loses out on a good deal of that survivability, lost those protections inherent to Zhonghui. Going to be a little while till he can stack those back up, which could be why the Olympus Bolts are trying to pressure out the right-hand side. That said, Final K playing a pick that he's very comfortable with, decides he just won't stick around. Not concerned for Sanford Soccer's safety because he still has beads, so heads back to base, picks up that Pythags piece, and now that sustained advantage that I was talking about that junk we just has by rote has gotten that much stronger. Pythag's very strong, not only for him, but also his team.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen a lot more Pythags. We've seen a lot of
Big
this
whiff.
CC connecting onto awesome Jake, but Jake able to scurry away. Decent investment there. I won't call it heavy, but Cataclysm and Stinger. It all comes up empty-handed, and Jake will survive.
Major whiff there from PandaCat. You don't necessarily need the damage from Stinger. That cripple, though,
Yep, the cripple.
would have secured the kill. Awesome Jake narrowly evades with his life, but it does at least cost him the shell. So, small win, I suppose, to the Jade Dragons in about a minute once those ultimates are back up. 2 minutes left on that relic from Awesome Jake, but with the pacing of this game so far, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Olympus Wolves wait for Jake's shell to come back out. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them just try and burn out some relics until then. Again, Lasbrook can just rotate in, has Blink to reposition himself very easily, pick up anybody with Ragnarok. Doesn't matter, you're shooting fish in a barrel, you're burning beads from somebody regardless.
Right. Well, only Pagon does not have beads at the moment. Haven't seen return pressure onto Pagon since Lasbrook rotated in early. There you go. There's beads off of PBM, who will roll himself away. Ragnarok down for a set of beads once again, though kind of alternating cooldown with Pagon's beads is Polar Bear Mike here. Barracuda's felt fine here in this lane. Early pressure on the left side of the map. That was Lasbrook jumping in onto PandaCat has given Artemis a little bit of breathing room. He'll stack up that Devourer's Gauntlet. It looks like Myth PandaCat's going to stick with that ability style build that we've so often seen on this AMC. Feels like
Whoa!
Pagon jumps in aggressively, has to use the beads, takes a little damage from the Kraken up and over the wall, goes Sam for Soccer. Then the drop kick is in on the Ven as well. The Jade Dragons have sent 4 members towards
See ya.
mid. They've gotten 1 kill to show for it, make it a second.
He's
And a
nuts!
third around the corner will escape, but the Jade Dragons still get 2. They only trade out Sam for Soccer.
Pagon is just a machine, man. Decides to initiate the fight himself, even knowing that Sanford Soccer is nearby. The decision is, I leap in, I get Ven's beads. He knows he's trading out his own beads every single time because the Kraken is the obvious response, but realizes that Sam, with that Relic Burn, should be able to finish off the kill. It was close, though. Sam, it was the tick damage from Winds of Shamash that kills off Ven. Rotates out, gets the stone shield, does the Gilgamesh, but still falls down eventually. And then an early rotation from Final K to chain CC Lasbra and confirm that kill. Pagon leaping into the tower again. Just playing with wild abandon. Just a devil-may-care attitude from the mid laner.
And a decent power spike as he gets the little weak baby fork for his second item.
Come on, man.
We're going back down this rabbit hole. No, but we actually never really analyzed the tier 2 item. We were only making fun of its appearance.
Okay, now what is this we?
You jumped on the train with me. 10% additional damage on an auto attack myth, and some CDR, and some power, and some mana. So jokes aside about
Nice shot.
how it's a small, weak item, the actual
Flimsy, soy.
right, as far as visuals go, the actual stats on it in the passive quite strong.
It is. Just getting any percentage CDR that early for that cheap is going to be valuable in its own right. I'm not sure that hi-rez is so strong that we're talking about like a Season 5 Draining Blade meta where you're just bypassing third tier just to hold on to the second for cost efficacy, but still very powerful at this point. Will synergize well with Ull's kit, and considering how aggressive Pagon has been playing, getting even just 10% additional damage is going to go a long way, especially considering Ven still without beats for another 40 seconds.
Right, you're hitting hi-rez eventually anyway, but the tier 2 does still give some kill pressure to Pagon. And Pagon has already shown us that he's willing to jump in. It seems like if you know where Jake and Lasbra are, Pagon might just be jumping in towards Ven time and time again here. PBM on the Geb, maybe considering a rotation into this red buff. And consideration is over. Mike is here. So is PandaCat, though, as Awesome Jake takes some damage from the bees. And the red buff is dropped down. Looks like Polar Bear Mike will be able to drop himself away. Successful red buff invade by the Jade Dragons.
As simple as that. The Jade Dragons just walk in. Mike eats a lot of those cooldowns early, does lose out on about 20 to 30% of his HP. But when Ven uses Tidal Surge, when he's already tossed those out, there's not really much follow-up, not much steal potential onto the buff itself. So the Jade Dragons disengage quietly. PBM still low. Doesn't really need to worry too much here. Has Ragnarok available still has Stone Shield, still has beats, as does the rest of his team. So the Jade Dragons playing with a good deal of safety. And that window that Trelly brought up, which I thought was just a phenomenal point on the desk, where in locking in Fenrir for the Olympus Bolts, you are essentially forcing a penta beads from the Jade Dragons. This creates a situation for the first 12 to 13 minutes where you're waiting to get second relic. Ven should be able to find some Krakens. He should be able to find some pressure, rotate in, make some plays, but so far, slow play. That window is dwindling quickly. Pretty soon, the Jade Dragons' key members are going to have Aegis available.
Sanford Soccer heads towards right, but Haddock's able to send him out just fine. Sam with no mana. Actually take a little chunk from the Fire Giant. I figured it out. Lasbro looking towards Pagon, who will jump away just fine. It's the upgraded bead that becomes beads, and that's why it's purification beads. Because clearly behind the picture there.
I think that's just light, man.
No. That's 3 beads. Look, see, it's a whole ringlet behind the Hydras. You can see it's a whole ringlet of beads. So that's where it becomes multiple. So we've learned now.
So we need to reach out to the dev team, let them know tier 1 needs to be purification bead.
Top priority. Change beads to bead. Yeah, for me and my sake, please. Good power spikes, though, for the Jade Dragonsmith. 2 fully stacked Transcendences, 1 for Panda, 1 for Pagon. And that Hydra's is finished off, as well as a Jotun's. Feels like if you're rotating Panda and Pagon into any fights right now, you're going to have just such front-loaded burst damage. I'm not sure how the Bolts will be able to deal with it.
Yeah, it's going to be a Cataclysm and a Stinger into a ton of follow-up. Lasbro over the wall. Barely off the mark with Unchained. PBM likely would have lost out on at least one of his CC immunities, Cataclysm or Bead for him, Beads for the rest of them. So the Jade Dragons narrowly avoid another, what could have been catastrophist situation. But with all that said, double Hunter composition for the Jade Dragons, Power Spikes already hit, Transcendence fully stacked for both Hunters. Gotta think, Gold Fury is very quickly becoming an avenue of thought for the Order side. They're going to burn it very quickly. They've got great confirmation, but not the best confirmation if Ven's got Kraken on.
Ven does take an axe, but ends up having beads off just a moment later. So missing now the beads is Venenu. Pagon just feels relentless on this pick. Even if it's not jumping in, looking for solos on Ven, it's hanging out in this little sliver jungle corridor, sending an axe towards Awesome Jake, helping PBM steal away the obelisk. Jake takes a nice chunk of damage. Pagon, though, get ulted in by Tusky. Beads and gets used, and Pagon jumps out just fine. Jake sends his ultimate in towards the backside of Pagon, who ends up getting connected on. Lasbra has found Mike with the Ragnarok. What a double Cataclysm around the backside as it paid off.
Will the dot do
a little bit more damage is all it takes, and Panicat has at least got that. But in the meantime, Mike has fallen. Ends up being a kill on a Mike for a kill on a Laz. Jade Dragons may be happy with it.
What a great just presence of mind from the Jade Dragons. The turn and burn. Polar Bear Mike says, look guys, I'm dead. All right, there's nothing I can do about it, but I'll at least set up some CC. Great Cataclysm immediately followed up by that Stinger, and the Hail of Arrows from Pagon will secure the kill onto Lasbra. Bees finish it off, and it's not often Bees are doing that for you. Bluestone plus the passive.
Whoa, Pagon.
One more auto.
Pagon. Whoa, no, Pagon. No, Pagon. No, Pagon. Then gets the kill. But Sanford Soccer eventually turns it around.
Good kick.
And a drop kick onto Ven will extend out this fight a little bit further. Sanford Soccer waiting on those cooldowns. Ven's so speedy, he's got Doom Orb just running away from this fight easily. Lasbra close by, but Lasbra 2 levels behind Sanford Soccer. Brutalize in, and Red Buff ends up getting dropped by the Jade Dragons. Pagon was 1 auto away from finishing off that kill, and Awesome Jake lives. But that shows you the sheer amount of burst damage that Pagon's able to output. And at least a nice trade out for the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, he's playing very well around the Hydras too, just making sure that he's auto-canceling every single one of those abilities, but probably should have got that kill. Whiffs 3 auto attacks back-to-back. Jake just moving around while shadow locking him, sets up for the return, but at least Sanford Soccer with the rotation in was able to take down the Nox and send her back to base a little bit earlier. Speaking of Nox though, that's an early low nose. Jake's pretty tanky.
Well, that was an early Gold Fury too. The Olympus Bolts send the Jade Dragons back to base and realize that there's an opening to get the first big objective of the game, and that brings the gold right back to even. It was over a 1,000 gold lead for the Jade Dragons, but the Olympus Bolts grab Gold Fury.
They know.
And actually have a couple hundred gold in the lead now. Dragons will pull out the Pyromancer. Haddix is close by. Lasbra rounding the backside of this fight. There's a ward directly underneath the feet of the Jade Dragons.
Make it 2.
So all their movement is known for the time being. One gets cleared, but the other one's still there. Pyromancer dealing some good damage to Polar Bear Mike. Pyromancer is low. Haddix unsuccessful in stealing it away. And what I thought was going to end up being a fight actually kind of dissolves, and the Jade Dragons will take the Pyromancer and leave.
Yeah, Sanford Soccer, great positioning there to make sure the Olympus Bolts were not comfortable in the approach. Gilgamesh, so threatening at this point, has decent survivability with beads still available, means that the Olympus Bolts could not commit onto him, but could also simultaneously not just ignore him. So, great zone from the Jade Dragons. It was up to Haddix to steal, and it's a little bit of luck if Haddix does steal, because nothing he has is going to match the damage output of Hail of Arrow, bladed arrows from Pagon. So, the Jade Dragons able to get the consolation prize for themselves, desync the neutral objectives slightly, gold and pyro. Still going to spawn relatively close to each other. The Olympus Bolts might have an opportunity, that said, to go to the Gold Fury and then immediately reset to the Pyromancer. I believe it's about 20 seconds apart.
Man, and now, Myth, a Titan's Bane finish for Panicat as well. I keep looking at the 1-2 punch of ability-based damage from Pagon and Panicat, and how effective that's going to be. Though the Bolt's itemizing pretty well against it, Haddix has got a sovereignty. Awesome Jake also has a sovereignty. That Kraken, or Duck, I guess, did a lot less damage than I thought it would.
It's a Quacken.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. Maybe I will. At one point this game, I'll say it. It's going to be the crazy Kraken play that I'll call out. Panicat forced to run away. Beads and Aegis used, but there was too much dive into the back. And the Olympus Bolts have found a couple of targets, make it 3. And nobody from the Bolts has been taken down in this fight. Pagon left running. Haddix on the reinitiation.
Watch fine.
Fine, okay. Still, though, with eyes for a couple members of the Olympus Bolts. Has to use the beads now, backing away beneath the Tier 2 tower. Haddix has got the stun, but there's just simply not enough damage. And the Olympus Bolts will have to be satisfied with 3 kills.
Pagon putting out a lot of damage right now. Lasbra has to play safe. They step back up into the Tier 1. The Olympus Bolts are still here.
Oh, no, but there's a tower still here as well. Fine, okay, pulled forward. And Pagon looks like we'll be left alone. The Olympus Bolts end up getting 4 kills. There is no objective on this side of the map, but a 4-kill and over 4,000 experience swing and about 2,000 gold swing for the Bolts over the last couple minutes.
So where does that experience find its home? Awesome Jake now 2 levels up over Polar Bear Mike, who still has not gotten the second relic available. You've got 2 levels for Haddix in the Soul Lane as well. Ven, who has been generally accosted in the laning phase so far, now actually has a slight lead over Pagon just now, taking over to level 17. Outside of that, Barracuda remains even, doesn't get any of the kills for himself, playing more of a support role on this Artemis. 0, 0, and 4, but the Olympus Bolts have got themselves the largest advantage so far in Game 1 of this best-of-5 series, and we're starting to approach the point in the game where the Bolts can probably start grouping up on these larger objectives, rapidly approaching that 20-minute mark. Maybe Fire Giant becomes an answer. We've already talked about the Jade Dragon's ability to burn through these objectives with a double Hunter composition. I think having a Poseidon plus an Artemis, pretty similar in DPS, and having one of those Hunters having crit, Artemis that is, means your objectives burn even quicker. Largest confirmation on the map being Kraken. I think the Bolts have got a power window here.
Quacken. There you go. That was
right.
my one and only for the set.
Okay.
Awesome Jake has been largely effective on this Nox as well. And Emperor's Armor, the most recent pickup. Pretty early in the game too, Myth. I suppose if you're getting it this early.
You've been in towers a lot so far.
Right, you're going to get max value
there it is.
out of the item. It's already working out for Awesome Jake now as Ben jumped on by Sanford Soccer. Lasbra's got a kill on a Panicat elsewhere. Kraken does some work in disengaging for Venenu. And it looks like the Bolts will live in mid, and Pandacat's got 2v1 over on left.
Great play from Awesome Jake there. That ultimate to make sure that Ven does not fall to the damage of Sanford Soccer. Nox ultimate, of course, removing some of that damage output of whoever it connects with. And this time around, it was the Gilgamesh. Had he not received the ultimate, well, it's pretty likely Ven falls down. Did not have the Aegis available anymore. Beads just now coming off of cooldown. But that said, Pandacat's still dead for 12 seconds. Still not a significant grouping from the Olympus Bolts. Maybe more concerned with the Oni Fury that will be spawning up in a second, or maybe more concerned with Pagon, who's had to retreat into his own tower, lost out on the beads.
Remember, Pyromancer's not going to be far behind this Fury either. Jade Dragons were able to split the last round of objectives. If the Olympus Bolts do this quick enough. Jade Dragons won't have much time to rotate over towards
They got
Pyro.
him.
These bolts are grouping up. The moment it spawns, the bolts start to deal some damage to it. Awesome Jake has locked down Polar Bear Mike. Haddix sends some auto attacks his way. Easy work on the Oni Fury for the Olympus bolts, but how about the fight afterwards? Haddix forced to dash away. His Stinger is connected onto the front line. But that's just a little bit of damage from the Jade Dragons. Olympus bolts able to get out just fine.
Jake, pretty close to will be heading back to base to regenerate some of that mana. So maybe the Jade Dragons with a numbers advantage can rotate over towards the Pyromancer and yet again take a consolation prize for themselves. This time, though, 3 members of the Bolts are around and ready to defend.
Bolts did not put up a fight for the Pyro last time, and it looks like it'll be the same trade out all over again as 20 minutes is crossed and 6,000 XP and over 3,000 gold in the lead are the Olympus Bolts, getting close to 4,000 or so. And they've got some strong itemization rolling through as well here, Myth. Ven has completed up the Obsidian Shard Chin Size for Barracuda will help out against some of the healthier targets. And Haddix has really started to itemize into the tank. And this King Arthur is going to be so hard to knock down. Could be looking at a Fire Giant here in the next couple minutes.
I think so. No neutral objectives left and only 1 tier 1 tower standing for the Jade Dragons. In the Soul Lane, could be we see the Olympus Bolts group there first. We'll control the positioning of the Jade Dragons slightly and get a heat check on exactly where everybody is from the Order side. And it is just a legitimately easier structure to take down than the Fire Giant itself. The Olympus Bolts, pretty significant grouping on the right. Already grouped on the fire, pulled out. Where the Jade Dragons, they're scattered to the winds.
Panda Cat over towards mid. Other few members of the Jade Dragons close by, but look how fast the Fire Giant is being melted through, though you can say the same for Ven. Awesome Jake has connected with priority targets with his ultimate. And the Jade Dragons have only gone in into a couple members, and they've lost both immediately. Now Sanford Soccer's alone as well. Trying to get a kill on Barra, but the ending gets as big. Barracuda ends up getting taken down by Pagon after sticking around a bit too long. A 1-for-3 trade, and the Olympus Bolts far and away ahead of that one.
Jake is going absolutely wild this game. These ultimates have always found just key targets at opportune times. I think if Final K doesn't eat a Nox ult there, he might just have a double kill for himself. That was a quick bit of damage immediately onto Ven. That was a quick bit of damage already onto Barracuda. And, well, now in losing some of that potential, Final K is walking around dealing way less. The Olympus Bolts are allowed to regroup, reposition, and set up the team fight immediately afterward. Panda Cat yet again misses out on that Stinger, so no return kill onto Haddix. The Bolts, they pull the fire once more, and it continues to burn quickly.
Poor Bear Mike does not have his ultimate. Suppose there is a crumb of steal potential here for Mike, but
an iota.
A larger potential for death around the corner. Though Panda Cat and Pagon, they've got Shred, Fire Giant, taken down by the Bolts. Double Heart Seekers for Pagon and Panda Cat, I thought might be enough to even just shred down one target. But Haddix able to back away. Bolts get the FG on all 5. And now a massive lead going into the late game.
Yet again, another ultimate, the Night Terror from Awesome Jake, stops any damage output from the Jade Dragons. If I'm on the Dragons right now, this has got to be one of the most tilting scenarios on the planet. Right, you lose a kill to a Geb shield, you think, okay, that's annoying, but like it makes sense. You lose a kill because you're just dealing less damage overall, and you got to play through an entire team fight like that. Very, very frustrating. Now the Olympus Bolts with Fire Giant on all 5 members get to think about their siege, and there are plenty of things to siege as of now. Still 4 towers standing, and their offense is incredibly strong. Barracuda with Vengeful Assault, all that additional attack speed will shred through these structures pretty quickly. The front line of Haddix and Jake, even Lasbra to a certain extent, who's decided to go towards a slightly more Bruiser build. Spirit Robe and then last slot, Berserker Shield, giving them a little bit of defense as well. Should be able to create the space to take out these towers. We're so early in the game, I don't even think the Bolts need to concern themselves with Phoenixes. Might as well slow play it, collect all that gold, back up, neutral objective spawning very shortly. This is going to be a large swing for the Chaos team over the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Swing in the same direction it's already been going anyway. A continued downward swing for the Bolts.
I think that's called a spiral.
Yeah, we're getting close to spiral territory if we're not already there. And it looks like the Jade Dragons myth, they realize that this tier 2 tower, a bit of an afterthought. And so it looks like Phoenix defense, well, you got to if you're the Jade Dragons this early on in the game. Try to keep that Phoenix on the map. Those Sanford Soccer solo split pushing the right. This could be a big moment here. Jumped on by Lasbro, who's got a lot of damage, but Sam, of course, can jump over the wall. Another jump in from Lasbra, though, and another round of brutalizes. Sam has not tried to return damage this entire time. Beads, well used by Lasbra, and that's a solo kill for the Bolts jungler. Sam gone for a minute. And Miff, that could be an impactful minute here in game number 1.
Yeah, the second Sanford Soccer locked eyes with Lasbra, Sanford Soccer lost that fight. Seething Howl giving you so much lifesteal, Bumba's Hammer giving you that HP regen. There was legitimately no fight back potential for Sam. And little known fact about Unchained, the leap for Fenrir, when you land it, it reduces its cooldown. So even with Sam immediately leaping over that wall, slight delay as he tried to find a spot where he could, Laz was able to chase it out immediately and confirm the kill.
Now Lasbra dueling with Final K in mid. A 4 versus 3 on left for the Olympus Bolts. Goodbye,
Tuski's
Phoenix.
going nuts.
There's way too much damage onto the Phoenix, and it's a great ultimate from Barracuda to soften up the defense from the Jade Dragons. Now the Geb is gone for 40 seconds, still 10 seconds on the respawn from Sam.
Final K still maintains his ultimate, but Jake lost out on his, so this time maybe the Zhongqi allowed to put in a little bit more work in this team fight. With PBM dead, though, it's going to be hard for Final K to find a situation in which he's comfortable walking into the back line of the Olympus Bolts. Seems that scenario will not come up. The Olympus Bolts take the mid Phoenix, and they walk away. I said a little bit earlier, they don't even need to concern themselves with Phoenixes, considering the point of the game we're in. They take down 2, 3 towers, and a Gold Fury to boot. That is a massive swing. 10,000 or so gold. I think we're officially in Spiral territory.
Yeah, we might have been prior to that tier 2 tower. We are definitely there now, and the Jade Dragons desperately searching for some itemization here as the Bolts are going to be able to go back and spend up some of the at least 2,000 gold that they have sitting in their back pockets.
3,400 for Ven.
Yeah, what does he buy here? Well, he finishes Rod of Tahuti, of course. Don't tell me he can
Calamitous Rod it for sure.
full buy another item. Oh, so
Was that a Nimble Rod?
Yeah, he full bought Nimble Rod of Tahuti and upgraded his Aegis and Beads.
Okay, so a little bit more attack speed for Ven, who was already shredding objectives. It just synergizes incredibly well with his second ability, the Trident. Again, it doesn't boost your damage getting attack speed, but it does boost the amount of swings you're able to channel while you are enhanced by that buff. So, Ven essentially just getting a whole lot more DPS. You do not even need Barracuda on the objective. If Barracuda dies and trades out, that's fine. As long as one of the two, Ven or Barra, survive a team fight, objectives are free. At least the jungle bosses. The Trident doesn't apply the prongs to these towers.
This is smart from the Olympus Bolts. Let's get some of the waves pushing while the Fire Giant is still 30 seconds away. If you can get mid and left with those Fire Minions pushing into the Jade Dragon's base before you even pull the objective, there might not even be a fight back from the Olympus Bolts. It's 15 seconds away from the FG, but it's a reinitiation from Awesome Jake. Little damage flies. It's actually Jake who takes a bit more than anyone else on the map. No ultimates expended. Everyone in the game is going to have their relics going into this next fight. It's as even as it could be, but it's not very even. It's 13,000 gold in the lead for the Olympus Bolts. Do the Jade Dragons defend this, though? Because I suppose, Miff, if you're fighting under your Titan, that's just going to die immediately. Maybe this is your best hope.
Yeah, we saw what the Phoenix defense looked like, and it wasn't very good. That said, Sanford Soccer wasn't around for it. Fight neutral territory, wins a Shamash. Might be able to find some value. Major keys to the victory for the Jade Dragons here is contending with Awesome Jake's ultimate and surviving the Tusky. I think those are the two cooldowns you really have to worry about.
There's your call.
Unlucky. They have to go back to base.
Yeah, Jade Dragon sent a couple back to base, make it 3, everyone else backing away. In the Fire Giant fight, that is not to be. The Olympus Bolts get the second of the game, and in my mind should be the last of the game if this Phoenix Siege goes properly. Fire Minions pouring down the left and mid of the map. And one more Phoenix left standing. It will be a 5 versus 5 at least for the Jade Dragons. But it feels like Pagon and Panda Cat have been sitting on the same exact itemization for a minute. Decent little spike here as Warrior's Bane grabbed for Pagon.
It's a good tier 2.
Yeah, great tier 2. You're going to have some good poke damage at least, but
it's a large hammer.
Need a lot more than that if the Olympus Bolts are going to be held at bay.
Sanford Soccer just makes his way back towards base, so will not be present for the initial fight. Haddix blinks in, no good on the CC.
Lasbra exchanges leaps with Sanford Soccer. We've already seen how that 1v1 goes, and the Phoenix simply an afterthought for the Olympus Bolts who have come back into this game. Lasbra gets another 1v1 over Sanford Soccer. Final K desperately hoping his ultimate's got something in it, but there's nothing to be found. The Olympus Bolts roll over the Jade Dragons in just under 30 minutes.
That was a convincing victory if you ask me. Panda Cat might just fall before the Titan does. Brutalize canceled. The Olympus Bolts clearly having a little bit of fun with their food. Pagon and Panicat, the two remaining alive, get to watch as the Titan falls down. The Olympus Bolts and Awesome Jake, I think in particular, deserve to pat themselves on the back after that game one because there was not much fight back from the Jade Dragons.
I got to admit, and this is the Bolts
Dude, Jake
of old.
looks bored.
Well, I mean, he's playing Nox support, right?
He is a villain.
I'm throwing out my ults, and that's about it. If this was Bolts of old, I would have been a little bit nervous with how that game started, right? Where Pagon's just starting to roll things, left side of the map is looking good. That's the type of game that's not unheard of to snowball out of control against the Bolts. But as of late, the Bolts have been playing so consistently, got their feet underneath themselves, and able to turn things around despite tough sledding in the first few minutes of Game 1. Game 1 over to the Olympus Bolts. Game number 2 coming up next.
Well, the Bolts kick things off with a very fun game one. And maybe even more fun if you're a Bolts fan, right? Because they get the win, and they find a lot of control. Team fights galore that go in their favor from early to late. It feels really good. And Trelly, we were talking about it a little bit, and Mifflin had mentioned it a lot during the cast. And part of the reason I think that Nox makes such a great Guardian is you throw out that ult, you don't care about damage, you care about making the other team do less. And that's exactly what Jake was able to provide for the team. Then everybody else just gets to step up and have fun.
Yeah, you're not going to see too much of Awesome Jake in these replays because what he does isn't get these big flashy kills, but what he did do is lock down people and pretty much shut down their damage entirely. That's what Nox ult does, and anytime you try to engage into a Nox ult, you just do less, and it's so much less, in fact, that it just seems so like it's just not those big flashy plays. It's just the idea that you're consistently doing way less is just so annoying to deal with, and you have to stop your engage. It's sort of like a Scarab's Blessing where you have to play around that fact. Also, Lasbra on the Fenrir just completely, once you got the Bumba's Hammer online, was able to find Sanford Soccer, I think for 2 just like 1v1 kills in the later stages of the game. And there was a lot of this, a lot of Tusky going down and then Barracuda just auto-attacking. And that's pretty much what Artemis does.
Yo, I'm real good at hitting 4 and left mouse click. And you know what? If that's what it's going to be, well, that's what it's going to be. And Barrow was able to open up a lot of opportunities. Again, the control that came down from the Nox as well as the Poseidon, like those whirlpools being devastating. And the Bolts might be the only teams that's picking them, and sometimes, it's hit or miss. But he's been hitting a lot more often lately, so this Poseidon is becoming what feels like almost a mainstay for Venenu. Not a lot of other people keep picking him up. Also notice this, and it was a question I saw yesterday. I think Wraithen had tweeted it at me, of like on average how much damage the Indra's Scepter is doing, and it's not a whole ton. It was like over the last 5 weeks, including yesterday, it was like 925 damage. I think is what Zayden had told me, and Trelly across the game, that's not a ton.
Well, that's just the gods, right?
Yes.
Because I think more often than not, you put it on these supports, help them clear some camps.
They get to do
clear
something
some
more,
waves,
yeah.
And then they're already not doing that much damage anyway. So I think it helps out a bit just in the clear department if you are one of these tanky Guardians where you can't really clear.
Yeah.
But it's just nice to have, as well as the fact that it's, your team gets gold and XP when you get the obelisk as well. So you get wins all around.
Give them credit. All that spawned just because Barra had the scepter during the last replay, and that's what my eyes decided to focus in on, as opposed to all the other fantastic things that were going on for the Bolts during that fight. Again, very clean for them, and we'll see how things are adjusted in game number 2. Dragons, first pick one more time. And so far, no adjustments. E-set into the Daji. And I wonder if they'll give us the 3-peat here. It was a Horus last time.
No shot. It's got to be Nox.
And yeah, Nox has been doing real well for the Bolts. So you have to imagine that it is on the board and is banned away to the point where, and I'm going to double check it just to make sure, I'm pretty sure the Bolts have a 100% win rate whenever Jake has that Nox, and they do. Yeah, ban it.
Yeah, the 2 problems I had with that game we just watched is, number 1, Jake's Nox, and number 2, Mike on Geb. Geb has a great matchup into the Bolts. I mean, I said it on the desk beforehand. This pick counters them, but what do you do after the fact? What do you do after it's shut down? You still can't do damage because of that Nox ult, even if Shadowlock shut down. And Lasper had the Bumba's Hammer reset, so it wasn't even the Ragnarok that was that big of a deal. It was the damage after the fact. So I don't like Mike on these sit-back style Guardians. I don't think he had too much fun either, so they're going to try to switch that one up. Starting off, though, they're going to take that Fenrir away from Lasbra and get it more likely in the hands of Sanford Soccer.
Yeah, and Sam yesterday, Game 4 versus the Titans, 10-2, absolute menace on this pick. I mean, running the show out of the jungle. So not something to be glanced over. It is worth mentioning, though, and this is just for the sake of conversation, that Mike played it in past, although we haven't been seeing any Fenrir supports as of late. And this one is just because it has happened, and I feel like I'm contractually obligated to, even though I haven't signed anything that says I have to say this. But FineOK has played Fenrir solo, and so while that's not out of the realm of possibility, it's like 99% probably for Sam, 0.5% for the other 2 each, right, to make out the full 100. Maybe not too likely, although I guess we can see they were willing to be flexible, give the Zhang Hui over there during the last game. Maybe they're having some fun playing around and experimenting with what they can do.
Well, I didn't have to sign anything, so I'm going to say that Sam's probably still on it. But as the draft continues,
I actively didn't sign anything.
We do see the Shiva come through. More often than not, we do see it in the jungle, but still a possible solo lane matchup. Lasbra probably wants to get active early against this Fenrir. It's a bit of a, I'm not going to say counter matchup for either of them, because the Brutalize you're always going to find the full damage on, but also you have a lot of CC immunity in the Shiva ultimate to try and avoid that, as well as CC immunity in the dash. So the jungle matchup is definitely interesting if, of course, this is a Shiva jungle, which we'll have to see again, more so how the draft pans out because of how well hi-rez has been playing on not only these tanky Guardians, the Cthulhu's, things like that, also pretty solid on these Warriors as well. So we'll have to see exactly how this draft pans out for the Bolts. But now the Jade Dragons have the chance to answer back. Obviously, Yamoja was also locked in. Nox was banned away, so Awesome Jake not going to get the run back, be able to be as dominant as he was on that pick, but looks like they're going to take the King Arthur away from hi-rez. So 2 picks stolen away. The Jade Dragons are being very smart about this. And then Thoth going to get some long artillery range in the mid lane.
I know that yesterday, 3 out of the 4 games the Dragons played with Thoth, or sorry, 3 games they played with Thoth, 3 games they won with Thoth. The 1 game they didn't play Thoth, they lost. So maybe we'll be in for a similar track record. I think getting the Yamoja there for the Bolts feels like a simultaneous, hey, we don't want Mike to have it, and Jake is good at this pick. The King Arthur, though, is one that I was a little curious about, wondering if the Bolts would answer. Last time they picked it, banned Cucullin and Cthulhu. We'll see what the Dragons maybe do in response. Poseidon locked in again, presumably for Veneno, and I'm going to heavy-handed say I want that to happen, because every time we've seen Poseidon jungle, it ain't done too well. So we'll see how that works out. But it's a Habwa Baron ban coming down from the Bolts. Artemis on the other side. So it feels like at this rate, hi-rez will have a little bit more leniency.
This has to be,
to be, right?
I mean, we say that. I mean, we know how we know how good hi-rez's Cthulhu is. It was banned away last time, and it looks like they don't care. They're still worried about the Horus. They are putting a lot of respect on the Horus. I mean, I'm not going to say it did bad. It certainly did well, but is it spookier than the Cthulhu, or do the Bolts even care about Cthulhu? We'll have to see here now that it is open. Again, the Shiva could still go into that solo lane, but we're still pretty confident as we see some cameraception here from Jordan about where this Shiva is going. And
I'm going to be honest, that shot probably looks a lot more boring from Jordan's perspective. Like, this is fun, but I'm pretty sure he's just pointed at, like, a wall camera. And so when you flip it, yeah, it's maybe not as visually enticing, I guess, since it's just mounted up in there. But, at least Jordan's having fun, hopefully.
Gets a little hook under the collar.
Yeah, that looks like a guy who's having fun.
yeah, I thought so. And we get to see the Cucullin, so no one cares about Cthulhu, apparently. He's just done. You've heard it here first. Cthulhu's out in the meta.
He's dead.
Yep,
He's gone.
No one's going to pick him anymore.
Worst god of the game. Trelly, a stamp of approval. He said it here first.
Yeah, they are going to grab the Cucullin, though, wanting to just brawl against another, ability-based warrior. King Arthur versus Cucullin in that solo lane. This is, as you said, a blast from the past, so to speak.
It's happened too many times.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot. Not so much this season, but definitely last season. A lot of like what Greaves into Stone of Gaia. That was the build on these 2 characters. Now a little bit different, more so Bluestone and a Sovereignty. Same sort of matchup though. Both of these solo laners know how it works. And now we get to see exactly where the rest of this draft shapes out.
And it was something I remember looking it up last year, and the matchup against each other, like specifically, they actually didn't lane a lot against each other, but it's because one was getting banned. Like, you'd ban the King Arthur, pick the Cucullin, or vice versa. And so, like, they didn't actually end up going against each other too much, but they both had way too many games played. And I do think there was a certain period where it became, like, absolutely heavy-handed in Season 8, where it was like, yes, this is absolutely going to be the matchup if you don't handle it otherwise. I think it was like 85 games, I want to say, for Cucullin, 93 for King Arthur. I could just hit a different tab literally on this laptop and tell you instead of guessing. And it is, hey, exactly those numbers I said. Good, go on me. It's going to be Bacchus Jingwei locked in at the very end here for the Dragons. Feels like the Bacchus alone, very almost opposite in my mind of what Geb wants to do.
Yeah,
Geb's going to hang back. Bacchus wants to fight.
This is exactly what I expected. After Mike plays a character like Geb and the team gets rolled over, I can tell he's like, I wasn't able to help my team enough, and now I want to play something aggressive. Bacchus, pretty much fills that out exactly. You get to blink in, you get to knock up, you get to any sort of engage you want. You're not retreating and peeling. You are completely going in, and that's the sort of playstyle they have right now. Fenrir, one of those characters that wants to get active early. Bacchus, one of those characters that wants to get active early. Thoth, he can get active really whenever he wants as long as he's not getting aggressed upon. And with Poseidon, gonna have a little bit of clear advantage if all of those abilities are spammed, but once you get that third ability and it can extend your range, Pagon will be sitting just fine in that lane, being able to outpoke Ven in that mid lane if that is going to be the option. Still holding on to Barracuda's ADC though, and they got a few more seconds to figure it out. Obviously the Artemis is banned away, no salty run back. The AMC though is going to be locked in.
Now, I was thinking that I was going to make a joke because Barra was like laughing. I saw him and Vin maybe joking with each other, and I was going to say that's Barra's like angry face that they took the Jingwei away. And maybe it is. Maybe he is upset about it, but they go for the Amuz and Cobb. Is one that I think for a lot of today, not last game, but very heavy in set number 1. There were a lot of AMC bans. I believe yesterday we saw a couple as well. And he has been a strong pick for them. Bolts, game number 3 yesterday. They lock it in, Trelly. And that was the game they won the hardest against the Warriors. So you have to be a little more worried, I think, about what this pick can bring.
Yeah, they have a lot of pressure as well as some solid late game. And we saw last game, Van went for this auto attack style build with the Poseidon, with the Nimble Rod and the Eye of the Jungle. So they still have that late game, like the burst potential as well as the shred potential with both of these picks. So interesting to see, as well as how much healing they really have built here.
And this is a match, if you're wondering, the Bolts, I had mentioned what they did yesterday when they locked in the AMC. And just to read off that draft, it seems very similar, so stop me if you've heard this before. So Yamoja, Shiva, that's already immediately. Then it was Amuz and Cobb, so they changed things up. And then the bottom 2 was Horus and Poseidon, but 4 of the 5 were still the same. And honestly, they probably would have run it all back if it weren't for that Horus band there towards the bottom. So everything except for the Horus, maybe a little bit of healing, some of the CC that Horus brings off the table. Instead, you've got the CC that Cullen brings now enabled to it. We saw how hard that draft could roll over a team yesterday, Trelly. Do they have the same kind of potential here? I mean, you're going up against a Bacchus. It feels like he's going to be really, really controlling, as well as a King Arthur for the front line. And that's not even factoring in the Fenrir yet.
I think you have to play around the Fenrir, and that's the biggest difference, right? Because you always have to be very mindful of where you are on the map, where this Fenrir is, and is Ragnarok available? Do I have beads? Do I have any sort of CC immunity to try and not get pulled into tower? Can I go in here? Can I use my escape? Do we have something to cancel Brutalize? That sort of thing always is going through your head whenever there's a Fenrir on the map. So I imagine the Bolts still very confident on this draft, and they still have the avenues to get active early, but you always have to be at least having your ward coverage down and very mindful of where this Fenrir is on the map.
I guess we'll get to see what the Dragons are going to bring for us here. Again, yesterday, this Fenrir looks phenomenal when Sam is able to pick it up and play it. We'll see. Will it look just as good from first pick here after going down in game number 1? Only time will tell in game 2.
Okay, the Olympus Bolts roll with the momentum that they've given themselves after a game 1 comeback victory over the Jade Dragons. Or will the Jade Dragons send us on to a game 3 in this best of 5? Dolson, Mifflin, and Doug one more time here between the Bolts and the Dragons. And Miff, the Jade Dragons, they stick with some similarities in their comp as far as mindset goes, though the team in general almost looks entirely different from how things did in game number 1. And I look towards Pagon and Panda Cat respectively as 2 totally different mindsets as far as maybe play style on their respective picks. Pagon still from range, I suppose you're still throwing out those abilities. Panda Cat much safer on the Jingwei. And PBM also has a pretty different look here with the Bacchus.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Jade Dragons draft and trying to figure out what it is exactly they're aiming for. And I think it's mid-game is going to be the largest power spike for them. And then come late game, you're going to have 2 key people that are going to have to do the majority, the lion's share of the carrying, and that's Pagon and Panda Cat. But Sanford Soccer, if he decides to go towards a similar build that we saw from Fenrir last game, will very quickly become a threat to these neutral objectives. And similarly, PBM in the late game will at least be the tankiest Guardian in the game. Whereas on the other side, the Olympus Bolts, I think, have similar power trajectory and are looking for a similar portion of the game in that Lazarus is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting throughout the early. Shiva, one of the strongest early game junglers in Smite, full stop. But you've also essentially got another double hunter composition, 1 physical, 1 magical. It feels weird to call Poseidon one of them. He isn't necessarily, but when you get close to these Gold Furies, when you get close to these Fire Giants and you're channeling Trident, your autos are doing the same or if not more than some of these other magical hunters. And then you've also got potentially one of the largest confirmations on the map. I believe Pagon should likely still win out slightly.
Haddix is low, but just fine here. Sanford Soccer and Final Cave stuck with the 2 versus 1 over in Soul Lane. That's a Lasber rotate around and form up the jungle just a bit more effectively. Actually, Pagon could be under some threat here. Lasber has Blink and has Dash and has a knockup and has a pull-in, but Pagon dashes out of it. Surely would have been first blood, but Pagon well times his dash out. As Lasber does get active early here, Myth, but just a bit short of capitalizing for first blood.
Yeah, so close. Evade and Punish just coming off a cooldown. Pagon even gets to hold on to the beads there, so that's just a blink from Lasbra for a little bit of Pagon's HP. If you look at the screen now, you wouldn't believe it happened because he's already back.
Believe what happened?
Yeah, exactly. He's 100% in mid. But losing out on those potions this early means that now Ven can start playing a little bit more aggressively in the lane, try and find that TKO, try and find some small windows where they can start looking towards neutral farms, start looking towards peppering some damage in towards these towers. A worthwhile investment, I think, from Lazar, who very narrowly misses out on first blood.
Well, that's what Sam showing up in Soul Lane and hanging out there for a little while opens the opportunity for. Lasbra can sort of get active wherever without worrying about where Sanford Soccer is on the map. I don't know if you heard me giggling earlier on. And it's actually very apt. I can't believe this Bacchus skin. That is hilarious. What is it?
I thought you were laughing at me, man. I got really self-conscious.
No, it's just and I don't know why it's that funny, because it's just a bear. But it is funny to me. I wonder how the lane interaction goes, because he wants honey, right?
What's the implication? Like, do bears get drunk on honey? Like, I don't know.
Yes, have you read Winnie the Pooh? That's
No.
all he does.
That can't be the case, man. Kids read that.
Yeah, but that's how they keep the adults interested, right?
The only way to keep an adult
you
interested.
gotta have an undertone.
Yeah.
That's it. I do wonder if there's any
Winnie
lane
the Pooh
interaction here.
was medicating the whole time, dude. That's crazy.
Yeah, unbelievable, as a matter of fact. For the third time, I'll try to make the joke about how PBM is playing a bear and he's up against AMC, who likes putting out honey, but the opportunity is passed. Yeah, no point. Pagon dashes out of Lasbra's initiation one more time. Sanford Soccer still level 4. And so just a bit away from capitalizing on potentially an early Ragnarok, which could be there. Lasbra does have CC immunity in the ultimate.
Yes, sir.
Awesome Jake does have River's Rebuke, but neither of those two have opted to pick up beads early on here. Soccer able to get the leap away, though. So now level 5, you got to look out for this Fenrir and where on the map Sam goes.
Yeah, I'm thinking Sam's going for Jake, right? The one guy who's got 0 CC immunity in the kit. That's a pretty easy pickup. You've got decent damage potential. Worth noting, again, undr'able CC from Panicat, those knockups in oh, God, it starts with a C. It's sequential. Oh, man.
Oh, my God, I remembered it yesterday. No.
You did. You helped me out yesterday. Either way, consequential? No. Consecutive.
Consecutive. Yeah.
Consecutive knockups from PBM and Panicat
nice.
will be phenomenal CC to follow up the Ragnarok. So could be that Jake in a lot of pressure, under a lot of threat, as long as Sanford Soccer is nearby. Consecutive.
Consecutive. I forgot it immediately.
Dude, that word is hard.
After you, yeah, why is that such a difficult word to remember? I mean, it's such an obvious word. I mean, concurrent. How hard can that be to remember?
Excuse me?
Okay. Blue buff looked at by the Olympus Bolts and picked up. And same will be said for the Jade Dragons on this side of the map. Not unheard of for Game 2s to slow down a little bit after a very back-and-forth game number 1. Usually it's the set-ending game that is the slowest, but between these two teams, want to make sure you iron out your mistakes from Game 1 as you head into game number 2. Polar Bear Mike opts for Stone of Binding early. And maybe that gives you some activity on the left side of the map, can open up a door for a kill.
Yeah, maybe PBM decides to rotate out a little bit earlier on. He's going to be dealing a whole lot more damage to anybody he connects just about any of his abilities with. I'm not sure if Intoxicate does apply the passive of Stone of Binding. The exact wording, I'm not sure if it's CC or hard CC, but either way, knock up, burst, both going to do that.
Just
Any
crowd
count control. Yeah, anything that PBM can hit you with besides his auto attacks is going to benefit from the passive of Stone of Binding. So keep your eyes on him. He's essentially just a secondary jungler as of now with this build.
We'll get the Belch off on Awesome Jake, but a Riptide It really didn't make any difference. No one from the Jade Dragons was close enough by. Could consider a red buff invade at some point, though seems like both the Jade Dragons and the Olympus Bolts happy with just farming.
Is that
things
allowed?
out. Yeah, apparently Pagon!
What?
Oh my goodness, Ven only has beads. And there's a way to ignite this match.
What?
Nothing is happening for 6 minutes. And suddenly Pagon hits Ven with everything, with just a Sphere of Desolation. And Ven will be able to head back to base and spend up some of that gold a little bit easier.
Won't catch me getting disrespected like that ever. Ven allows him to dash onto tower line and doesn't even return damage with the Kraken. Lasbra dances his way out of there. Sanford Soccer puts in some good damage, but Shiva has got great survivability. Should be able to work his way out. This Mike's got something to say.
Belch, yes he does. He has something to say, and it's a burp straight to the backside of
Ven's got
Lasbra. Ven, though, can rotate over, but does he have the damage? Mike is going to have belly flop here shortly. Kraken, maybe he's going to have to.
What?
What? No!
No.
You got to use the Kraken.
Ven.
Do you see Mike's player cam? He's laughing and clapping his
He
hands.
did the 6 God hand on him,
Yeah,
man.
he realized that Ven has to use a Kraken. Now Ven doesn't have a Kraken for a moment like this. Sanford Soccer left running. Ven has to use the beats of getting a Ragnarok target anyway. But at least a turnaround kill for Venenu, and actually could be another one here. Sanford Soccer had just enough mana, literally just enough mana to get the jump off.
Fine, okay, acting as goaltender will stop Haddix's onslaught. That is legitimately, it's a comical play, but it's a big one. If Ven doesn't have Kraken or have to use Kraken there, he's got it here. He's got it for the kill onto Sanford Soccer. He's doing a lot more for the Olympus Bolts. One auto attack or a Kraken. This time it was the Kraken. Mike comes up big for his team and probably applies a good deal of mental damage, especially considering what the last minute has looked like for Ven. Dove inside of his tower essentially by Pagon soloing him, walks out, has to Kraken after missing 4 auto attacks. That can't feel great.
The good news for the Bolts is, despite the 1 kill advantage, gold effectively even outside of a few hundred. And actually you're in the lead by a few hundred XP as well. The Jade Dragons have been making the plays. The Bolts have followed up on a play or two, but hasn't resulted in too much just yet. As you'd expect, Panda Cat goes Devos into what should be a win demon crit later on in that build. Silver Branch has been very popular, and Barracuda will stick with more of the ability-based mindset. What have you felt, Miff, between these two hunter styles? You look at late game sort of power curves. Would you argue damage looks similar, just a different avenue when you look at sort of the ability-based damage of Barracuda versus what could be full build crit for Panda Cat?
Barracuda slams gods and tanks. Panda Cat slams squishy gods and objectives. That's the difference between these builds. Neutral objective advantage
Mike
always
slams
goes to the
Barracuda.
crit. Yeah, maybe.
Barracuda has to use the beads. Actually, airstrike up and over. Mike had Intoxicate and Belly Flop, I assume, but held off as Barracuda will have to use the beads and the stinger, walk himself away, and at least a purple buff will end up getting dropped off here. As Mike has been on his world tour, falling just about a half level behind Awesome Jake, who's hung around collecting up plenty of farm. And the difference maker in mid right now is the solo kill from Pagon over Venenu. Again, maybe about a half level there in mid, as Final K has done the same up in solo lane. Looks like Lasbra's been able to maintain some good pace here.
way.
Uh-oh, Ragnarok, Final Judgment. Easy kill onto Venenu. Lasbra trying to channel out that heal, but won't end up being enough for his mid laner. Jade Dragons, they combine, and they grab a kill.
Yeah, Ven's getting the streamer treatment this game. He has just not been allowed to play the match whatsoever. I mean, Pagon seems to just have his number. That time, it's set up by Sam for soccer, but even regardless, I think that damage output
He was like 5
from the
seconds away
Thoth
from
would be
beads.
pretty tough. Yeah, that feels bad. And this time now, Beads now upgraded. No longer Bead, now Beads.
Yep.
Yeah, he can do some CC if you need a little bit more often.
He's going to need it if the pace of this game continues. Now the opening line for the Jade Dragons has got to be around this mid lane. A 2-level lead for Pagon and double flat pen early in this build. So if you're continuing to fight around Ven, around Barracuda, that's really where Pagon, you'd imagine, can make a difference. You wonder, though, if that gives the Jade Dragons some confidence fighting a little bit more consistently over on the left. Maybe early Gold Fury, something like that. Not sure if that level gap is that wide just yet.
No, not quite. And considering both mid laners have got pretty decent confirmation, Lasbra still slightly ahead of Sanford Soccer, and at the portion of the game where Shiva is still incredibly strong and is allowed to channel that ultimate 4 damage, might dissuade the Jade Dragons from looking towards the earliest possible objectives. That said, if Pagon continues his pace, continues pushing this lead, the conversation of, hey, both Kraken and the Final Judgment having similar damage output will become a moot point eventually, as Pagon ticks 2 levels up, 13 to Ven's 11, also has about, let's call it a full item between a tier 2 for Ven into a tier 3 plus tier 1 for Pagon. Potentially Jake's life here, Invade Punish, no good.
Riptide out from Awesome Jake, though, is good. There's some crits from Panda Cat. Why not? Looks like just the Oracles will be under the eye of the Jade Dragons. Thought maybe, I mean, Jake was nowhere near low enough to immediately pull the Gold Fury or anything like that. Just the routing of Panda Cat there made me question it for a brief moment. No, I think, if that said, the Bolts have at least done a good job of, in the last couple of minutes maybe, slowing down the pressure that's all found its way into Venenu. It hasn't gotten worse, right?
That's because he was respawning.
He was respawning, right, waiting for his beats to come back. He's been sitting on this near soul gem for what feels like a few minutes now, though. At least feels like it's stabilized. The bleeding has not continued yet and actually closes up the level gap a little bit.
And the gold gap between Ven and Pagon is not so massive at this point. I think it's about 700 gold separating these two as Barracuda forces the beads yet again. Mike, though, he's sticking the fight.
Stun connects. At least Barracuda able to avoid the airstrike in. But I wondered, and that's why I was confused last time, because that's what I assumed was going to happen when Mike jumped in last time, but Barracuda just uses the beads. Or just ends up walking away without even having to use the beads last time. This time, beads used by Bear. It doesn't matter, though. Belly flop in and kill for Panda Cat. So the Jade Dragon's starting to win this game in the carry rolls, and a early tier 1 tower gets knocked down over on left. Polar Bear Mike low here. Takes some damage from draining the obelisk. Pagon reminding us all to take a deep breath as channels the Final Judgment. Nice Riptide back in from Awesome Jake, but River's Rebuke held on to. And Polar Bear Mike will walk away with red HP.
He will. Also able to steal away a good deal of those flowers, spawning up that obelisk for themselves. The Jade Dragons in a very good position, I think, now to start looking towards objectives. Pre-15 minutes, I call 3,000 gold all right, team fights are now actually legitimately in our favor. The Olympus Bolts trying to limit some of that.
2,800 gold?
Yeah, 2.8, yeah, you're not worried about that at all.
Fine, okay, is in, and who else but Venenu's being jumped on. Bolts get the Pyro, but Ven will die for it. At least secures the objective for his team.
Might be some
but
more.
Fine, okay, on a warpath now. Chasing down Lasbra, double stun. What an initiation from Fine, okay. Simply not enough damage, though. Awesome Jake uses his last bit of Omi to Riptide away. Belly flop up, Final Judgment through. And Sanford Soccer around the back of this tier 1 tower should be able to finish off the kill, but Pagon will get it done all on his own. And the Jade Dragons are rolling in game 2.
Somebody has got to stop Pagon. Pagon cannot be continually allowed to make plays like this, dashing in aggressively into tier 1 towers at the 14-minute mark. Started at the 2-minute mark. You can remember all the way back then. It's got to be Lasbra. It's got to be Haddix. It's got to be somebody, but there needs to be pressure on this, though. 3-0-0 has not legitimately been forced to use one of his relics defensively just yet this game. The Jade Dragons mid laner has been on a tear with nobody to slow him down. As the team fight phase starts to develop, as we get further and further into this game, sure, 5-on-5 engagements by nature, you'll see more people potentially looking at Pagon, but he is very rapidly becoming an issue. He needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'm not sure who wants to look at Pagon right now, even in a team fight.
It's got to be Haddix, I think.
Considered an Ob Shard, ends up selling that off and going full Charon's coin now. And if the killing continues at this rate, why not? You're going to stack that up plenty quickly if you're the Jade Dragons mid laner. You seem to think it's Haddix who's got to jump in and have something to say about Pagon. I suppose the way his itemization has gone, at least with the Bulwark of Hope, could help stabilize a bit, but still going to take a lot of damage.
It would. As long as you're removing Pagon from the fight, though, you don't necessarily need to kill him. You just need to force him back or force some relics. Lasbra doing a good deal of it.
And good timing on the ultimate from Lasbra. There's a shutdown for the Olympus Bolts. Final Judgment doesn't confirm the kill. Polar Bear Mike has already gone over a wall once. Won't do it again. Belch gets used, and there's a stun on the Final K as well. Venenu rotating out of mid lane. He would love to get some revenge for the way that the early game has gone. Kraken gobbles up Mike. And Mike will fall to Haddix. Now Sam is Ragnaroked one but the numbers are dwindling for the Jade Dragons as hi-rez has got a double. It's a 3-kill swing for the Olympus Bolts. A knock-up around the backside at least slows down the reinitiation, but FinoK caught in place, and hi-rez picks up 3 kills.
Yeah, we knew it had to be hi-rez all along. Rotates into his first team fight and makes a massive splash. The Olympus Bolts, in removing Pagon, remove the problem. Remove 4 members and potentially the Fire Giant. 16 minutes in, and where did it happen? Where does that fight start? It's Pagon walking in aggressively through the back camps of the Olympus Bolts. Before hubris, or before the fall comes hubris. Hubris precedes the fall. Whatever the saying is, doesn't matter. Either way, it's the Olympus Bolts now for the first time in the driver's seat. Game 2.
Wow. The way that this is completely turned around, I thought the Jade Dragons were on the verge of just ending things, but how many times now has this Olympus Bolts team showed us fight back that we might not have expected in Season 8 or even with the Renegades roster in Season 7? A maturing of the minds even after so long with the same roster.
I'm glad you bring up the Renegades because this is exactly what they used to do as under that moniker. It was, hey, we might fall behind in the early, but as long as we hang back, eventually whoever we're playing against will expose their chin, and that's only 1 punch on the chin is all it takes to knock out. That might have just been it. That is a massive fumble from the Jade Dragons. The Olympus Bolts will completely close up that gold gap without even having to expose themselves to any real danger. Tier 2 towers, maybe a little bit more difficult to take down at this point, but all the Tier 1s, Gold Fury respawning very shortly, as is the Pyromancer. It is going to be a massive gold swing, and it's already been an immense experience swing. Ven has closed up his gap completely, and it's actually gone in favor now of the Bolts.
If you're the Jade Dragon, I mean, it's hard to nitpick now without fully watching that fight back. Maybe in an ideal world, you just let Pagon die. You say, all right, he's dead. Because then you're fighting at an odd number fight time and time and time again from that point on. The Olympus Bolt's able to capitalize. Now with Fire Giant still for another 2.5 minutes. Towers won't shred as quickly as they will in the late game, but still shredding nonetheless. All 3 Tier 1 towers on the map have gone. Still behind, though, in gold, technically. Though the Jade Dragons, Myth, look like could be considering a Tier 2 tower defense. Maybe just to keep the Bolts at bay.
Pagon on Thoth is one of the best mages you could have on defense. He still is equivalent strength to Ven, so I think right in the decision to put up a defense on the Tier 2, but you need everybody here. You don't want to take a 5 versus 4 or a 4 versus 3. So now with the Jade Dragons rotating in, we'll get a good heat check on how confident the Olympus Bolts are feeling. Worth noting, a lot of the gold that they've acquired to close up that gap is still in their pockets.
hi-rez finds the backline, riptide back from Jake. That's when he catches out onto his solo laner, double knock-up on the other end of the bead zone. hi-rez will transform, dash away. Ven in the back has taken a whole mountain of damage from Polar Bear Mike, but the Jade Dragons have as well. It's really only PBM that's super low. Nobody from the Bolts equivalently low to Mike, but team across the board are going to need to make use of some of the healing from Awesome Jake. Tier 2 tower is going to go down, and the Jade Dragons positioning shows you they're okay to let this one go.
Lazarus still has ultimate available as well. He was essentially not in that fight, so could get involved, still has beads and blink, could utilize that ultimate to just resustain, but Jake's already done such a good job of it himself. The Olympus Bolts pull out the Oni Fury. FinoK and Sam for Soccer nearby. That's a reset.
Oh, Sam doesn't get any stuns, and it looks like at least the ultimate from Lazarus forced out. Could have been a big opportunity for a stun, for a team-wide stun there from Sam for Soccer, but does not end up connecting. Bolts kind of pump fake a back here, stick around on the Oni Fury, but the Jade Dragon's in as well. Lazarus not having his ultimate. It's pretty impactful, but neither do a few of the other members of the Olympus Bolts. Nobody's ult on the Bolts is ready to go, whereas the Jade Dragons have a few. Pagon from over the wall will be able to find plenty of damage from where he's at. This tense positioning just feels like the Dragons are corralling the Olympus Bolts forward here. And FinoK happy with it. Final Judgment flies through, and it's found the back line. And the jumps in from the Dragons are absurd. And the damage is there to follow up as well. The Olympus Bolts being shredded now by the Jade Dragons, who are unhappy with how the last few minutes of this game has gone. It'll be a 4-kill swing to the Dragons in one fell swoop.
Generally 20 minutes in, if you take 4 around the Gold Fury, you're going to the Fire Giant. Fortunately for the Olympus Bolts, they had taken it moments before, so the Jade Dragons will have to contend themselves with the Oni Fury and only the Oni Fury this time around. 20 or so seconds left on the respawn. You got to think the Jade Dragons might have a position where they can start looking towards the Pyromancer as well. But that is the Olympus Bolts posturing too aggressively, stacked up too heavily. They allowed the Jade Dragons to find multi-man knockups, to get a 2-man Unchained, a 3-man stun from PBM. PandaCat finds a couple with his own knockup as well. When CC is landing like that, when the Olympus Bolts are that heavily stacked, considering all the resources they had already expended in the team fight prior, no wonder the Jade Dragons able to take the fight.
You can just kind of tell. The Dragons were almost just corralling the Bolts into one big group, and then all of the AoE that was there, and even the airstrike from PandaCat was effective. Final Judgment clipped some targets, a couple targets. That just felt like a fight that the Jade Dragons were choosing, picking and choosing where the Olympus Bolts were allowed to stand. Now, it's not disastrous, but that gold lead that was even, yeah, now back in the other direction by about 3,000 or so gold. Unfortunately for the Bolts, they're the ones trying to come back. Otherwise, you might be in an even state now, but after having made a comeback, now find yourself a little bit further behind after a sweeping defeat in a team fight. That must give the Jade Dragons a little bit more confidence in pulling out this FG. PandaCat with crit, able to work it down effectively, and it's going to be on the Bolts to find an answer.
Yeah, not quite anybody willing to step up so far. Awesome Jake takes a little bit of damage from Fine OK, but the Olympus Bolts have got vision on the Fire Giant, which has now been reset by the Jade Dragons. The Bolts will not walk in, I don't believe, unless the Fire Giant is dropped low. If the Jade Dragons want a team fight now, they are going to have to force it, and the only way to force the Olympus Bolts out of this defensive positioning is to pull the fire and create a threat on the map. As of now, Fire Giant still full HP, finally pulled by PBM. PandaCat starts his slow trudge through the HP bar again.
Dash away, though, as there's an initiation from Fine OK on the backline. Have to keep your eyes on Pagon. Watch out for the Thoth in this fight. That's exactly what Lasbra has in mind, who's got a knockup, and Pagon won't win that fight. Haddix has got the last bit of damage. A Kraken is great. This one's on to Sam for Soccer.
Wow.
A double kill from the Cullen, and Haddix is doing it again. 5-0-1 from the Bolt solo laner, who found the priority targets and wants to reinitiate yet again.
PandaCat forced to use the beads just to immune the root from Haddix. Fine OK, still healthy. He's used his ability to rotate back into the fight.
Are you insta-pulling FG here?
I think you have to. The Olympus Bolts, though, they've got time to play with. 30 seconds left on Sam for Soccer, 20 on Pagon. Haddix low HP, doesn't have teleport, so he's going to have to walk back the old-fashioned way. Surprised the Olympus Bolts are showing so much respect here.
Yeah.
I think Fire Giant, you definitely want to pull it soon, and that fight goes the Olympus Bolts' way because the Jade Dragons get impatient in their initiation. It's Sam for Soccer going very deep into the backline on his own. Pagon left high and dry once the fight starts. Both PBM and Fine OK try to peel for Sam's. That just leaves Pagon alone in the back. The Olympus Bolts, they baited out the Dragons.
Mike, Fino, PandaCat, the only 3 Jade Dragons around the fire. Lasbra forced the dash away. FG is low, and the FG goes to the Bolts. Mike was well-timed on his belly flop in, but just short of stealing it away. Barracuda sends his regards with the Stinger, and the Bolts will back away after securing the second FG for the team. Now in game number 2. And yet again, Myth, the gold swings back. This time the Olympus Bolts are the ones evening things back up. And 24 minutes in, we are back to even, at least as far as gold charts go, yet again.
Yeah, gold may be one thing, but Fire Giant on 5 belts, I think, spells an advantage to one team. The Olympus Bolts now can start to continue what they had started earlier, which was the siege. Left side Tier 2 tower falls on the initial Fire Giant siege. 2 Tier 2 towers still standing, and this time around should be a little bit easier to finish off some of these structures. A lot more items finished up. Titan's Bane now for Barracuda. He's going to be doing a whole lot of damage to these structures. That said, Pagon has not become any weaker since then, and this Thoth is very adept at keeping minion waves out as well as gods out of these structures. So the Olympus Bolts likely will try and dive him before looking towards the objective proper, and we've seen what that dive consists of. A blink from Lasbra, a blink from Haddix. When those two are able to close gap as efficiently as they have been, it's going to be very difficult for Pagon to survive some of these fights. So where will the Jade Dragons decide to dig in their heels? Where will they decide to put up that defense? Seems to me the Phoenix is the name of the game for both of these teams. I had expected the Olympus Bolts to strip Tier 2s first. They want to play with as much time as possible on these Phoenixes.
Yeah, for real. Not much time to play with if the Jade Dragons have their way. Initiation into the back.
Really good
Final
damage.
Judgment goes. Haddix is low, but the Phoenix kind of gone before my eyes.
Great
What a
ults.
Rivers rebuke from awesome Jake. That gives the Bolts an opening, and the Riptide on the other end. What can't Jake do in this team fight? Belly Flop just finds its way out. The Bolts desperately searching for that opening kill, but it will just escape back into the fountain. The Jade Dragons lucky to stay as 5.
Man, the Olympus Bolts. Jake has been having himself just a phenomenal day today. The Nox gameplay, stopping every bit of aggression from the Jade Dragons. Now this Yamoja, re-sustaining in the team fight, making sure that everybody is capable of getting out alive and even saving his own life with the Rivers Rebuke. But the Jade Dragons are still strong. Ultimate's still on 3 of them. So they might be able to stop the Olympus Bolts here. Neutral objectives have spawned, Pyromancer and Primal Fury. And the Olympus Bolts remain grouped as 5. Maybe seeing if the Jade Dragons are willing to walk all the way into their jungle as they had around the Fire Giant just moments before.
Wow.
Not a natural back. The Jade Dragons, they pulled the objective instead. And the Olympus Bolts, I suppose, just willing to let this one go. Curious with this reset. I wasn't expecting the Olympus Bolts to walk that far away. If they are willing to reset themselves like that, maybe head back to base, spend some gold, but instead a couple members remain in the field, a couple members head back. Still, though, taking the most important Phoenix on the map, still a major win for the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, tier 2 tower in mid and right still there. Only 45 seconds left on the Fire Giant. If you really want to min-max this, if you're the Bolts, you're hoping you can at least knock down one more tier 2 tower as the Fire Giant wears off. Not much gold in hand, you know, 1,000 here or there between Ven and Lasbra. But outside of that, the Bolts have spent the gold that's there. Still with 30 seconds left. I think the Jade Dragons probably realizing that this tier 2 not worth fighting over. You've got one more big chance at a Fire Giant defense, you'd assume, in just a little bit of time. So we'll let this tower go down quietly. And how about the turnaround in this game from the Olympus Bolts and really Venenu, who still is at 1-4-4. And still is only halfway up the damage charts, even a little bit lower.
Are you praising him or what? What's going on here?
I am about to praise him. I feel like even with the massive damage numbers missing and
all the deaths
all the deaths that happened early on, the Krakens and the Whirlpool, some of the intangibles, these I don't want to call it a zoning because I'm harshing on him again at times.
Just leave Ven alone, man.
I do feel like Ven has found his impact in his own way later on in this game, despite what was a very rough start.
Agreed. He was not dealt a great hand from the offset. It was a lot of just dive, focused aggression from the Jade Dragons, all centered around Ven. And now, in the late game, everybody only hits 20 once, has evened up. The match has started to pick up some items that'll make him very, very strong. I don't know if you saw that. That was upwards of 1,000 damage per auto attack on these jungle bosses. Seer of the Jungle plus Nimble Rod means that he is shredding objectives. If we're lucky, he'll do it again to this one. Nope. He will not. He's going to go look for a kill instead.
So unlucky. Fire Giant 10 seconds away from respawning. This one will be a minute off from Enhanced. So if the Fire Giant dance lasts about a minute, it will be an Enhanced Fire Giant. At that point, the Jade Dragons will likely feel a little bit more pressure to step up. Difficult to defend against a standard FG with the state of the map being the way it is. But an Enhanced Fire Giant might effectively just close it.
Lazaro playing very far to the side here. Was not spotted out, didn't walk on a minion wave. So
if you're the Bolts, do you wait for it to be enhanced?
I don't think you
pull it. Maybe you don't pull it anyway if the Jade Dragons are here. Maybe you look for a fight first anyway.
I think it's just going to happen. It's just going to be enhanced. Look, 30 seconds left. Yeah, you might as well wait it out. It's not as if they're in a position where if they pull it now, it's so much better. Whereas if they do get Fire Giant, and now what is 15 seconds, it is so much better. The Jade Dragons, left side Phoenix has respawned. Final K off to defense.
Final K has teleport. Maybe that's the difference, is that Final K had to go back to base. Fire Giant melting through, and Fire Giant goes down. It's not enhanced, Smith. It's the standard one, but the Olympus Bolts get it nonetheless. But the fight after the fact, actually looking okay for the Jade Dragons, but Haddix still has something to say about it. Barracuda backpedaling. Aegis well timed. Up down from Sanford Soccer. And the follow-up from Mike is effective as well. The Olympus Bolts grab themselves the objective, but they might lose 3-4 members of their team in the meantime. Lasbra reinitiates as Awesome Jake forced to dash away. The Jade Dragons have bought their time. And Miff, I think they might just end the game on an FG fight gone wrong for the Bolts. Down the right side go the Jade Dragons on the back of a deicide.
Heart's got to go out to the Olympus Bolts. I think they were waiting on that left side minion wave to start approaching the Phoenix. They were concerned, and they knew somebody was going to go and defend it. Final K does, but TP's back in immediately. Makes a massive splash in the team fight.
They're not doing enough damage.
No, Panic
And they don't have a minion wave, and Venenu's
Hold on,
15 seconds
Lazarus
away.
coming. Hold on, or San Francisco rather. Well, Lazarus is
They
in
got
30
10
seconds.
No, they can't. No chance.
No. Yeah, no, you're right.
All right. I was. Those
Yeah,
were
sit back down.
Those were long death timers. I was for sure that this game was over, but anything but. That's 30 minutes in. The back and forth, the ebb and flow, whatever you want to call it, of this game continues on.
These are the wildest charts I've ever seen.
Absurd. The ups and downs, and they're all like one big team fight. Now back to even in gold, as much as it matters. 31 minutes in.
It's the less valuable Phoenix.
Right. The good news for the Bolts is that the Fire Minions got the Phoenix down anyway at the beginning of that team fight. And so the Bolts effectively get a Phoenix, but so do the Jade Dragons. And now we're even once again, Myth, at 31 minutes, near full build for everyone.
Yeah, gold is separated by about 100. Experience straight up doesn't matter. I mean, one level until PBM ticks over to level 20. Relics, slight advantage over to the Jade Dragons maybe, whose relics are going to be coming up very shortly. The majority of the Olympus Bolts have not got anything available to themselves as of now. I think this game extends. 250 on the Fire Giant respawn. That's where the next team fight's going to happen.
You tell me I should pull out my Maxnomic and
I think so.
sit my butt back down.
Yo, look, I'm just saying, if your lumbar needs some support, it's right there.
It does. And there, I got the nice back seat pillow here for the lumbar support. What's that, lower back?
Oh, the Jade Dragons are actually grouped up pretty heavily. Maybe they're willing to take a fight without Fire Giant in a siege situation? They're strong,
They're
to be
counter-pushing
sure.
the Fire Minions.
They're strong, to be sure. Oni minion waves as well should help out a fair deal. Pagon's got great poke potential, but that should be mitigated by the healing of Awesome Jake. Yeah, no way the Jade Dragons want to just straight up walk in a true 5-on-5 in a scenario like that. But even in posturing there, heat check, maybe just seeing whether or not the Olympus Bolts were going to respond in kind. They do so. 3 back and get ready for the defense. The Jade Dragons reset themselves as well. This is an even game. One team fight. Everything up until this point has lost value. Nothing matters that has happened in the last 33 minutes. Well, all that matters from here on out is the next 5. If there are even.
And it's been so back and forth, you have to imagine the Bolts have the edge now, right? Because the Jade Dragons won the last big fight, which means it's time for the Bolts to come back and win the next big fight. It's just how things have been going this game, but I don't know, Miff. It feels like the ebbs and flow, like which mid laner gets picked off early. Pagon did. Venenu's been getting sat on a good bit as well.
Look how ugly the Bolt slash lines are, except for Haddix, who's having himself a phenomenal
You're telling
game.
me I'm being mean?
1-3-1-5-0-3-0-3.
I'm not saying they're good.
If we remove Haddix, the Bolts are combined like 2 and
15?
15, yeah, 14.
2 and 14 if you remove Haddix. Yeah, it's bad. But Haddix has had something to say in all of these fights. Now
Thanks
it's
for helping
6 and
with the
1.
math.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, I mean, 8 minus 6, 2. It's pretty clean there, Miff. But I had to think about it for a moment or two. Spectral Armor picked up for 3 members of the Bolts. That's been there for a little while. But just now get the opportunity to point it out. And Panic Cat, who had gone into crit, now has it limited by the members of the Bolts that want to be jumping onto Panda Cat. And so you have to look at the map state here over the next couple of minutes. 30 seconds left on the Fire Giant respawn. Oni minions have been dealt with. You bring up a good point in that the worst Phoenix to have down in a moment like this is the far left, and that's what the Jade Dragons have missing. But it just respawns. And the Olympus Bolts will have theirs respawning a couple of waves later on. And so at least the Jade Dragons only have another 1 Fire Minion wave to deal with. And then wouldn't you guess it, the Bolts are only going to have another couple to deal with, and the game truly will be even. But if the Bolts can pull it quicker, or if Mike gets caught out, it might be simplified.
This Fire Giant's going to burn incredibly quickly. Could be another TP from the King Arthur. Final K should be able to join the fight very shortly.
Oh, Fino.
And Final K has been the issue, Ben.
Oh, no. Ven walked at, and now Fino K, are you the one on the wrong side of the fight? Lasbra jumped on by Sanford Soccer over on the left of the fight. Lasbra's going to rejoin the rest of his team. Stunned down from Awesome Jake onto Polar Bear Mike. The backpedaling from the Olympus Bolts, desperately escaping from the onslaught of damage that the Jade Dragons have. Awesome Jake might be the first to go down. Airstrike puts Panda Cat
Not looking
right in
good.
the front of the fight. Panda Cat's got one onto Barracuda. Mike has added one as well. Pagon rips through Venenu. And the Jade Dragons break history. They will win 2 big fights in a row. And they'll send us on to a game 3 all tied up.
Man, the Jade Dragons front line is the difference maker in this one. It is always Final K initiating the fight. It is always PBN, always in there. The Olympus Bolts front line has had great performances throughout the early team fights. Haddix, of course, does a whole lot of damage, 6-1. Hard to say anything bad about his performance, but this one was just always dictated by the Jade Dragons initiating and getting in towards these priority targets. Ven was just not allowed to play, whereas look at the end of that team fight, I don't think Pagon took any damage.
Wow, what a game we just had. Hard to think back 35 minutes ago, but the Dragons rolling all over Venenu early in the game. And then some great team fighting brings it back, gives an early fire giant to the Bolts, and then the Jade Dragons wipe the Bolts. And then the Bolts get an FG and wipe the Dragons. But then the Dragons beat back the Bolts, but they can't end the game. And then they do win a second fight in a row for the first time in game number 2. We are all tied up, game 3 between the Bolts and the Dragons coming up next.
3, 2, 1.
That's right, it's a tie set here. The Dragons make things interesting in game number 2. It bounces back and forth. We'll break that one down. For now, I want to talk about what you just saw, and that, of course, is being a Prime Gaming subscriber. You saw a ton of games there, all of which that at any given time you could potentially get for free games, as well as a ton of exclusive content, as well as seasonal discounts and other surprise perks, and of course, your free monthly Twitch Prime sub that you can use anywhere, plus all of the other things that you already get, like the free delivery, the music, the movies, etc. that come with being a Prime subscriber. So if you're not a Prime Gaming subscriber, you're missing out on so much stuff. If you are, well, first off, a great place to use your sub. There's a button right down there. Second off, make sure you use all of your perks, not just the sub, and get in on all of those other fantastic deals, games, and all of that. And of course, thanks to Prime Gaming for powering Season 9 of the SBL. But I'm Gore, that's Trelly, and we got an interesting game number 2, Trelly. I think it starts a lot with the Dragons winning.
Right.
And then it gets interesting because of Haddix. And then the Dragons start winning again, and then it gets interesting because of Haddix.
You're going to do this a few more times, aren't you?
Yeah, you gotta like bounce back and forth. Very similar to like the ping pong game you and Mifflin quickly played to,
Right.
what, 3?
Yeah, we played to 3.
Right before we came up here. It was back and forth. It went, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, and then finally someone wins. In this case, it was the Dragons.
And in this case, it was Trelly who won the ping pong
Yeah,
game.
Trelly did win the ping pong game.
Just so we're clear. But yeah, so Pagon looked really good. And obviously, it's very nice to look good on Thoth, but I think Miff was right to highlight the fact that the front line of the Jade Dragons were also looking good, which in turn makes it so Thoth can survive in the back line and do this pretty much all game. PBM, a world of difference on the Bacchus as opposed to the Geb. A very CC-oriented sit in the back line sort of style pick where this was not what Bacchus was doing. Bacchus was always on the forefront of these fights. Final K right there with him on the King Arthur. They wanted to be as dominant in the front lane as possible, and then the carries were able to just sort of, free cast once they're up there.
It just made things look very easy. You can see Pagon into Panda Cat here having a good time. And who's at the forefront of each of these fights? Yeah, that's right. You've got either one of the two frontliners or Sam in there with the Ragnarok occasionally. A lot of low health bars for that kind of last fight over on the right-hand side. And it was just a matter of finding the right kills and in the right moments. You get to go 4-0 if you're Panda Cat, 4-2 for Sam, and 5-3 there for Pagon. Maybe not the most beautiful slash lines. I think Miff did call most of the bolts. Again, cover up Haddix, and he described them as ugly for the slash lines for the bottom. So they were not very good looking. When you look at the GPM, also not very good looking for the bolts there. A lot of under 500s, which is going to be massively devastating. And then Haddix was 6-1 and able to get about normal farm that game. So it was like one normal, balanced farming game and one really good KDA. And then the rest of the bolts.
Okay, well, we saw the stat lines, but at least we get to see the camera, the player cams, which are
now,
very
when you look
good
at
looking.
It's nothing but 10 handsome lads out there.
Exactly. I see 120 cents. Wait, 110 cents. 100 cents. 10? 5? Yeah, it's 5. I knew that.
10.
I thought maybe the coaches were there. That's why I said 120.
We're going dimes.
Yeah.
That's what we got across the board. Nothing
Right.
but 10s that are locked in there.
Right.
And there's 10 of them. So that's where we get the 100. So a full dollar, dude. We got a full dollar
we
out
got a
there
dollar.
playing. Let's go, baby. Maybe it works out. Bolts, hey, they're going to be first pick this time around. We'll see what exactly they have going for them here. Up to this point, Kleena, Ardio, Athena. That's been their 3 bans. Eset, Daji locked away by the Dragons 2 times in a row. And then once it was Horus, and then a little bit later it was Horus again. And then the second time it was Nox in the top 3. So we'll see if the Dragons maybe continue on that. Immediately shifting things up, though. The Bolts go for the Athena first.
Yeah, they don't want to deal with the Athena jungle from Sanford Soccer. We know that much. I can't imagine the Jade Dragons let through the Nox. I still think that's going to be something they want to not deal with. And this time around, Uller Still not going to be, I mean, not still. They already saw how much the Uller was able to do. They don't want to deal with that. So now a lot of different adjustments here. Again, the Jade Dragons probably still want to take away that Nox. Awesome, Jake. I believe you confirmed 100% win rate on the Nox?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty spooky. Has a lot of
does too much.
lockdown. Does too much and is just a little bit too annoying for them. So I imagine that will be the option here. Barracuda had a lot of picks taken away from him last time around, but usually the Bolts sort of save his pick for last anyways. So we'll have to see if they try to prioritize it because the AMC sort of got dove a lot that game, as well as this Poseidon. Then it did not have too much success on the Poseidon. The damage numbers weren't that great, and the survivability just wasn't there. So I imagine a few different adaptations here for the Bolts, depending on what this band is going to be. They have to think about it for a bit. The Fenrir was obviously pretty annoying, but the Thoth is going to be the option here. They don't want to deal with that extended range. Pagon was a little too free on that pick last game.
Well, Thoth gets banned off, yeah, like you said. Maybe just a little worried because it did too much, too well. Not just that game, but yesterday as well. So the Dragons a little more limited. Notable, Nox still available. Yamoja, RDO. A lot of picks, actually, when you go from top to bottom. Things that have been very powerful. The E-set, notably, still up. And so those are just a few of the many that the Dragons could ban here. And a few of the many that could impact the game. I mean, you also have to look at some of the later bans that we've experienced, the Horus things that were banned against the Bolts that realistically maybe aren't the top priority to get rid of them, but are also something that could be worrisome if the Bolts get them. And they are going to go for the Nox. So we're kind of riding onto, well, I don't want to say ride that lightning because that's not what the Dragons want to do. That's what the Bolts would like to be able to keep up. Unfortunately, it does mean that the Bolts are going to get a top priority pick. It's just which do they value more, and it seems Ardio is what they see as the top pick of them all.
Yeah, it's wild that we live in a world where Cthulhu and Nox, all these picks that are being prioritized, and Ardio is the one that is being let through, but Nox is the one they had to ban away. They had a few different options to ban away there. ESET does make it through, as you mentioned, so will be the first option here for the Jade Dragons. And another quick answer, the Fenrir. So that's going to be a lot of CC, again, locked in. This time around for the Jade Dragons. Remember, the Bolts won with that complete lockdown comp the one time where they had so much CC and they wanted to deal with that. This time around, though, Ardio deals with the Fenrir pretty well. Again, you have you're probably wanting to get a Beads because you don't want to deal with Ragnarok, but you can cripple out the Brutalize from Fenrir, and you can stun it out. There's two different ways to deal with that Brutalize, so not going to eat too much damage there, but the displacement, that's what's going to be a bit annoying. But Oleron is going to be the choice here. More often than not, we see that go into the duo lane, so Barracuda. And it looks like Chiron, so double ADC comp once again for the Bolts with an Ardio. Looking pretty good so far.
Yeah, feels solid. I'm surprised. I was expecting, I saw ESET locked in. I was thinking, okay, cool, ESET, Yamoja. That's going to be what they lock in. Then, oh, well, there was no Yamoja. And then I see Oleron. I'm like, all right, Oleron, Yamoja, whatever. And then there's no Yamoja. And still, we've made it now to the point where supports are going to get banned. And you have to imagine that is going to potentially be on the list. Although the ESET, despite the fact that we've seen it go, mid way more often, you're not sure just yet if that is a Pagon pick or if it's going to go over to Mike.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago we'd be saying, we see ESET and support more often than not, but it still could go mid. And then we've seen it mid so much, now we're like, yeah, it's probably going to go mid, but it could go support. I feel like right now, probably more leaning towards the PVM ESET until we see what this draft continues to be, because Nox has been banned away, and ESET, that's the one matchup you really don't want to deal with. ESET always very strong in Atlas, so they don't really have to ban something like that away because you already have that pick for it. I'm not even sure the Jade Dragons are too confident where it's going just yet. Probably right now, banking on it going to that support role, but they still have the option based on what gets banned away. This time around, Jingwei, Uller, and Hou-Yi. So a few Hunters the Bolts are taking away. That's a lot of Panda Cat shots, but also Pagon has the Uller, so we're going to group that one in as well. But remember, the Bolts already have their ADC. They already have the Chiron and the Oleron. They can take away as much as they want. Now, the Jade Dragons, what do you answer back with? Do you go for something that you want to get like upstanding pressure? You already have a lot of CC, as we mentioned. We'll have to see. Their ADC, they don't have to pick right now because they know no more ADCs will be coming through.
Oh, yeah, they're lucky in that regard. I think the Bolts play it safe with their bans as well, where it's just like, okay, so if we ban Guardians and that ESET goes mid, then we look foolish. If we ban a bunch of mages and then that ESET goes support or ends up going mid, then, okay, wow, we're nowhere with it. And so instead of trying to lock down everything, they try to limit Panda Cat. And Panda Cat still somehow gets on her, so still feels really good, I think, for the Dragons. Does leave a little bit more flexibility in their draft and forces the Bolts to maybe play that waiting game, looking for something presumably over there for Jake, as well as a pick for Lasbra. And this is where, I think we've been talking a little bit more about Gilgamesh the last couple of days, has not necessarily been doing too well overall. In fact, every just quick eye glance at him has not won any of the games that I just saw him in. So it is not maybe the time to go back, despite that being one of the better picks that we've seen for Lasbra. So what do you think? I mean, like jungle-wise, as well as like just Jake-wise, like there seems like there's a lot of options still available.
There are still a lot of options still available. You have to consider, number one, the fact that ESET is going to always be a lurking presence, so to speak. And Fenrir, you always have to worry about that Ragnarok. Right now, Sobek, a solid answer back. You have that pressure in the duo lane. You're able to cancel out that wing gust. Again, this is if ESET is going to support. They still are holding on to the mid lane pick possibly, or the support pick, so we'll have to figure out where that does end up going. Shiva, though, that's going to answer back some of the early pressure. That was the one issue I had with the Bolt draft thus far, is you have double ADC and you have no real form of early aggression. Now, sort of answers your problem. If you want to get to the late game form of the draft, that's what you're looking for. Now they've answered it.
And interesting because, from earlier today, the Warriors-Titans set, as well as even yesterday, the Titans playing, the Shiva has been highly prioritized by a lot of teams. And yet, it made it so far down the list this time around, not even looked at or banned out in a majority of these games. Last game picked up by the Bolts. We'll see if they can translate it into a better Game 3 for themselves. Morrigan locked in. And there's some interesting Morrigan transformations with the one that always stands out when it's this kind of combo. It's the Cthulhu, right, that stands beside you. You get two of them. And it feels like that's going to work out pretty well, especially with an ESET Circle of Protection. I think team fights for the Dragons here seem a little nightmarish.
Yeah, especially if you figure out whose beads are down. You could do a double Ragnarok pull. You could bring someone pretty much to the Phoenix at that point if you do it in the mid lane. So looks like Pagon's going to have a lot of different options here. And an on her ESET duo lane as well is going to have a fair bit of pressure into Sobek Oleron. As long as these plucks aren't consistently displacing you, you should be just fine. Obviously, Panda Cat likes to go to this pick when he wants to find 1v1s. He wants to fight. This is the only reason you pick on her, essentially, to win lane and win it handedly. Desert Fury, a great tool to try to immune Sanctified Field. So I imagine Barracuda is going to be sitting pretty far back in this lane, not really wanting to take the fights against on her. About after level 9, that's when the real power spike of Honor starts to trickle down and he just turns into another one of those ADCs. But level 9, that's when he's as strongest. His ult can essentially 100-0 you.
Something you got to be worried about, especially Oleron. Miffet said earlier, level 3, there's like an interesting power curve for Oleron, and then you're just kind of waiting for a little while before you become as relevant as you could be on her. Might be able to capitalize on that. It's also something that we like to talk about a lot with Sobek, but like you said, if that pluck displaces you, or in this case, if there's a Dispel magic that's just really well timed and it ruins you, then all of a sudden you're CC'd, you're killed off, and maybe there's some potential there for the Dragons. A lot of fun plays, I think, that can happen all across this, and after the way Game 1 went, but specifically how back and forth Game 2 was. Admittedly, the Bolts maybe need a little more of that back and forth to come from not just the solo lane, but being able to bounce back, I think, makes things very interesting here. And Trelly, for Game 3, I think we're in for just as fun of a bout.
Yeah, I like how you use the word fun, because when I think of dealing with two Cthulhus, that doesn't sound very fun. It depends on which side of the Cthulhus you're on.
For me, this will be fun, because I get to watch, and I don't have to play either of these squads.
Yeah, unfortunately for the Bolts, if you're trying to deal with that early game, you're just going to say, this isn't fun at all. How do we shred through these HP bars? Obviously, with the draft we see, more often than not, there's not going to be a chin size at all in this build, because Chiron goes full ability damage with the Heartseeker, which is still going to take a lot of HP. And then the Oleron is just going to build, magical items. So no sort of HP shred for these two Cthulhus. You're going to have to deal with just the base Heartseeker and things like that.
Well, we'll see. Will the Bolts bounce back after game number 2? Will the Dragons find themselves a lead here in game 3? Let's find out with Dave and Mifflin.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Gore. I have a feeling after game 3 we'll find out, though, because the Bolts and the Dragons, for at least 2 more games, will be going toe-to-toe. And it feels like, Miff, the Jade Dragons have had the early game leads now in both games, kind of let game 1 slip through their fingers, were able to bounce back to their own comeback almost in game 2, and actually have a pretty good composition, I think, against what the Bolts have going into game 3.
Yeah, if this game goes to late from an even state, it is going to be so difficult for the Olympus Bolts to take these team fights. one Cthulhu ignores Sanctified Fields. Two Cthulhus both ignoring Sanctified Fields or even just peeling for each other while simultaneously attacking Barracuda means that this Ola run, I don't care what you build around it, unless it's a Khepri, you're probably going to fall down if you want to get into a range where you're able to get involved in the team fights. So the Olympus Bolt's going to be leaning heavily on Ven in mid on this very aggressive Chiron pick to establish a lead, and Lasbra out of the jungle so that they can maybe limit some of the potential of the Jade Dragons, and specifically this E set, to look at neutral objectives, limit their ability in some of these late game team fights. If this game goes even and we get to 20, I think it's like a 9-1 Jade Dragons.
Haddix has to back away, but so does Sanford Soccer. We have seen the Jade Dragons combine over in the solo lane, but Lasbra's been a little bit more apt to rotate around standard jungle starts. It looks like he'll hang out with Haddix for a little bit longer in the early part of this game, or Sanford Soccer, the one rotating out of lane. Ven pulling out something a little bit different, has played somewhat immobile mages in the first couple of games, and now we get a look at the Chiron. I imagine this just goes full ability damage, and for good reason, Miff. When you pair, I mean, what do you end up going? What, Heartseeker at some point, Titan's Bane at some point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All, you know, you'll potentially Transcendence.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, there's no, but that, yes, potential, but it's like 100%.
Right, but it's still potential. At some point, right? Could be first, maybe.
Probably first, I'm thinking. If it were going to be somewhere.
Right, the potential would be first. By the time you get all those items online, then connecting with the proper target feels like baby Thothulth sometimes, doesn't it? Where the Centaurus just melts down health bars.
It can, but some of those health bars are pretty massive.
Okay, right.
Like two Cthulhus.
All right, oh yeah, I guess. I'm thinking Pagon on his own, just like as the Morrigan. Okay, maybe Panda Cat's health bar.
Panda Cat's going to struggle, but Panda Cat's he's not your win condition. Like, Panda Cat's there to hit towers and hit
You are not
objectives.
buying in on the Bolts draft at all.
I think the Bolts, where they win is the next 13 minutes. It is whatever Lasbra is capable of doing in the next couple of minutes. It's what Ven can do before the Jade Dragons group up as 5. Are there scenarios in which the Olympus Bolts could win? Yes, of course. In SMITE, it's always play on field. There's always, what was it, the quote? It's always player diff. That's coming straight from Sanford Soccer.
Right.
But that's not to say that your composition can't do a whole lot of the heavy lifting for you. And I really am just a fan of this Jade Dragons draft.
Let's see if the Jade Dragons can stabilize then for a little while, and if the Olympus Bolts can get out to an early and active lead. Blue buff invade is good for the Olympus Bolts, so at least take a little early pressure away from Fine OK. Sanford Soccer has the blink, but so does Lasbra. And we did see Lasbra, at least in game 2, get a little bit more active up against Pagon. Didn't seem to matter, though. Pagon found the damage anyway. Pagon in Desert's Fury.
Are you serious?
He goes for the 1v1 and gets it. Centaurus needs to hit the target, but it won't. Pagon in a 2v1 grabs the kill onto Venenu, and Lasbra forced to run away as well. He is a madman, the newcomer, making it happen against Ven.
Dude, Pagon has got Ven's number. He's got the download complete. He knows everything about this guy. The last 3 digits on the back of his cards, the expiration date. Pagon's got it all, and he's got it in a little notebook because Ven has been getting dominated so far in this set. And we do not often see solo kills. We do not often see the laning phase come
in one set.
In one set. It's happened like every game so far. The Thoth dashing in and finding the kill the second to go to level 5.
Uller in game 1.
Uller in game 1. Now Pagon transforming into Panic.
game.
Pagon's diffing this dude mid-chasm in the early portions, and then we get to the team fight, and all of a sudden Ven is able to still play to the level that we expect. But as of now, Pagon on the Morrigan, who should not be winning the early game, by the way, against a Chiron, is doing exactly
What
that.
a dynamic player Pagon has turned out to be for this Jade Dragons team. Wasn't all of the answers
Every
in game
game.
1, at least. Yeah, it actually is nuts. It's one thing to say, you know, every once in a while we see it. When you really think about it, every single game, we've seen at least one from Pagon over Venenu. And this one is a much more mobile character for Ven, something that could get out of moments like that, but Pagon able to close the gap. And it's under pressure from Lasbra as well at the same time. Just makes that moment all that much more impressive. But, Miff, as you so often like to say, 1 kill does not a lead make, right?
Oh my God.
And
Don't quote me at me, man.
Trelly's doing it on the desk. No, I'm doing it on the cast. You can't escape it. And it's now the next few minutes if Pagon can keep that ball rolling, if Sanford Soccer can make something happen over towards mid.
To play devil's advocate
Okay.
and continue with my point earlier, Pagon doesn't need to keep doing anything besides farming.
Yeah,
the,
sure.
the Jade Dragons just want to look for that team fight. Anything that they are able to establish throughout the early game, icing. Sure, you have an E-set, but E-set support doesn't fall off like E-set mid does. You're always going to be a pretty decent initiator, always able to apply a whole lot of CC, give your team that HP shield, damage mitigation from circle protection. You're not necessarily who you're looking towards in support to confirm some of these objectives. So if Pagon just spends the rest of the match just farming up, waiting to group up his 5, no complaints from me. But seeing how Pagon has been playing,
Whoa.
he's not going to stop.
Lasbra's blinked forward. Centaurus out, but doesn't find much.
my
Double
God.
stun from Sanford Soccer. Brutalizes got the damage. And it happens in mid lane again. Venenu falls to 0-2 in the first 6 minutes. And that's just a counter gank from Sam. Pagon baits in Lasbra. Blink no good. And Sam makes it look easy with the Brawler's beat stick is all he's got. That's all he needs. Ven falls for the second time.
Yeah, already mitigating some of that healing that Ven will get from the passive. Awesome Jake, healing in the kit, healing from Haddix. All of them. Every single Olympus Bolt. I was going to run through them individually as I was breaking it down, but every single one of those guys has got some form of
What about Jake?
self-healing or team healing. What about him? Sickening Strike, heals himself.
Yeah, what about Bear, though?
Barracuda's got the third ability, heals himself as well as his allies.
There you go. We went through all of it.
Well, Haddix and Laz, yeah.
We already listed those guys.
They all got healing. Brawler's beat stick goes nuts.
Right, there you go. I don't want Jake and Bear to be left out by the end of it.
I'm sure they'd love to be left out of it.
At this point, they want to be left out of anything that has to do with what's going on over in the mid lane. And that is something to be said. Is the problem is, I was going to say, there is some scaling involved with these.
Oh, they got the dash.
ADCs. That's awesome. Jake slowed down.
That's tough.
Here's the good news for the Bolts is passive farm has given them like a hefty gold lead that is now just shrinking. It was over 1,000, and all of these individual kills for the Jade Dragons are simply closing up that gold lead and closing up the experience lead. So it is actually even now because the Bolts have done such a good job at finding the neutral farm up to this point. But the Jade Dragons still much more active in the kills department in the first 7.5 minutes.
They have been. No large disparities established as of yet. Actually a level lead for Barracuda in the lane, who's been left alone for the most part. Jake now 1 level down on PBM, but E-set support, you're not really reliant on a lead there. I suppose in pulling a lead, you don't have to look towards Lono's mask, which is so often the answer in second slot, because E-set being an immobile mage, also in support, means that you're initiating the fight. Panic Cat having some fun, throws out the Salt Shaker.
Of course he has the Salt one on, right?
Of course. I mean, it's the most toxic global emote in Smite.
Right, and Panic Cat's not one to shy away from...
Toxicity?
Well, no, I was going to say like dancing on like 1v1s, things like that.
Is that not toxicity?
I think there's degrees to it, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's like friendly toxicity. Banter myth.
Yeah, ribbon your boys. I got
Right,
it.
at that point it is, but Panda Cat strikes me as one who would love to use a Salt Shaker in if Panda's in mid.
If he hits you again, you let me know.
No, I'm speaking out against it. What do you mean? Sanford Soccer has brutalized for Lasbra? And my goodness, it's now not only being done to Ven, but anyone that goes around Sanford Soccer apparently is going to have a bad time, as Sam is on a killing spree here. Double stun from Haddix, but a blue buff invade god right. Sam already used Ragnarok. That means Haddix won't have to use the beads on his dash away. And again, though, it's the Jade Dragons closing up the gold gap that the Olympus Bolts are passively building up. But if we're going back to your point, Miff, that's something the Jade Dragons are fine with. Just keeping the gold stable for a little while.
Yeah, I think experience the more important of the two stats as of now, because the gold difference is 1 and the experience is about 1,000. So the Jade Dragons, slight lead there. The Olympus Bolts would love to get something started up soon, man. Lasbra on Shiva is only going to continually fall off as the game goes on, so you really want him to be able to make plays while he's in that power spike. That said, it's 3-0 for Sanford Soccer, means that he's not really, Lasbra that is, matching that level of pressure.
There you go.
As Jake gets involved, Lasbra's here too.
Luck on to Mike, who does have Circle of Protection and Silence and Spirit Ball. Panda Cat lets Desert's Fury fly. Circle Protection up and down. And 3 versus 2, no good. Olympus Bolts come up empty-handed. Do force out a couple of ultimates from the Jade Dragons, but Jake had to use his as well. And wherever Sanford Soccer is hovering right now, needs to be a place that the Olympus Bolts are wary of at 3-0. The Fenrir has made a lot work so far. nice ward over in mid. We'll have Ven spotted out.
Uh-oh.
Considering a tower dive here, Ven does have beads, uses them, but there is too much damage. Centaurus could have made things interesting there, but Ven for the 3rd time this game dove on. And for the 4th time this game, it's Sam who's got a kill.
Man, Sanford Soccer just having a field day right now. Nobody wants to line up in the 1v1 except for maybe Haddix, and Haddix will never be given the opportunity to take a 1v1 as Fine OK will always be nearby. The Jade Dragons just dominant across the board. As long as you said, Sanford Soccer is there, the fight probably going to favor the Jade Dragons. Lasbra has just not had that same impact so far. Would love to. I said it earlier, it remains true. Would love to be able to start rotating in towards these fights. Would love to close gap on the Pagon and make sure that he isn't allowed to establish enough of a lead, but now an entire level over Ven.
Where are you
just
going,
now
though?
takes over to level 11. As Lasbra?
Yeah. I mean, if Pagon doesn't have ult, I guess that makes
It's
mid
Pagon.
without ult, though, right?
Even with ult, I think you got to force the ult. It's the most
Right,
valuable thing
right.
you can force
I guess
out.
if we're talking about finding kills, that's a different conversation, right? If you're just forcing utility off the map, it's got to be Pagon.
Yeah, Ven's not even that far behind, really, so even from a range, if Lazar decides to engage with Ven pretty far away, Centaurus, as you said, 3 mini Thoth ultimates, should be able to connect from a distance. I think it's got to be somewhere. The answer is not nowhere, which is what we've seen so far.
It's got to be somewhere.
It's got to be somewhere.
Right now, Sanford Soccer on left, ultimate onto Barracuda, and that has resulted in another kill. It's getting tedious at this point, fellas. Sam, do something different. The Olympus Bolts want him to, at least. Awesome Jake has to dash away from this.
It's good damage.
Sam, considering a jump back in. There's some good damage from... What was that?
Impale.
Was that impale?
Impale and brutalized.
That was a third of his health bar in one instant.
Dude, Lasbra thought about disengaging, was like, yo, okay, hold on. They're
wait a
actually
second.
low. Let me get in there. Oh, no.
All right, so now the gold is in favor of the Jade Dragons by about 1,000, and it's going to get worse because of this Gold Fury. This is the Jade Dragons style of play that they have diversified away from in recent years. Not like by choice necessarily. They've just gotten better at different aspects of the game. But it's always a team that's been rooted in the ability to just do this in the first 12 or 13 minutes, which is just run you over. Every once in a while, Sanford Soccer just has that game. And it looks like game 3 of this set is that game for Sam.
Hey, don't get it twisted either. Remember how the whole
But
snowball
he gets
starts
weaker
up.
with the Hydra Star, somehow makes himself less good with the...
We can't keep spreading that misinformation. The joke is Hydra Star looks goofy, and then it turns into Hydra Star. Man,
Yeah.
the Hydra Star actually a very strong item.
Yes, you're right. Okay.
But it's Pagon who starts off this game by soloing out Death. You did not just guffaw at the sight of Hydra Star
I did.
again.
All right, I gotta. All right, people are building it too much for me to run this bit every time it happens. So this is the last one. I've retired the Hydra Star.
It's not
bit.
a bit. That was a real laugh. You had genuine joy in your eyes.
Yes, but this is the last time I'll have joy as a result
no.
of that bit. I promise. The
I'm
light has
take
left
your
my
joy.
eyes. Barracuda luckily has been able to stay stable with Panicat here in this lane, though it doesn't knock down the tier 1 tower. Oh, hello. This is fine. Okay, all the way over from solo lane. Barracuda
doesn't work.
sanctified field. Yeah. You're not doing much up against Fine OK, but the damage has turned around.
Okay.
Finally, Ven getting something done. Panicat, though, has the last bit of damage onto Barracuda. Impale sends Lasbra running the other direction, but watch out. 3-man knockup. What's the follow-up? Sanford Soccer and PBM on the backside of this fight. The Bolts have turned around some damage.
It's Sam.
The CC immunity, fantastic. Sanford Soccer jumps in, brutalized, right into the circle of protection. Somebody's got to finish off
He's
these
healthy?
kills. And it might be Sam. Dash back in from Fine OK. Fine OK's got the second. Sanford Soccer getting low, though, as Haddix has the shutdown, and it looks like the Bolts will end themselves on a 3-for-3 fight.
3-for-3 favors the Olympus Bolts, considering how large the bounties are on the Jade Dragons. That's a massive swing back to the Order team. Great rotation from Sanford Soccer to at least find something for his squad, but the Olympus Bolts may have chased a little bit further forward than I would have liked. A 3-for-3 may have less value than a 2-for-0 or something along those lines, so the Olympus Bolts may be overzealous in their aggression, are at least able to strike back, but that's not before Ven immediately falls down again. So resets his own bounty, gives over a little bit of additional gold to the Jade Dragons. Barracuda dies first, says, I'm not walking back to that bloodbath, heads to the opposite side of the map to look at the Pyromancer.
Yeah.
Pagon's there.
This is close. Barra's low. Yeah, he's got to leave. Pyromancer's
again.
low as well. Olympus Bolts don't fully drop it. Oh, the Jade Dragons can just do it, but Haddix is here. Both solo laners pretty strong at this point in the game. The Mire goes down. And watch, the Pyro's just not going to get done at some point here, unless the fight happens and the Jade Dragons or the Olympus Bolts come out ahead. Centaurus flies and doesn't find the value Ven maybe was hoping for. Pyromancer repulled by the Jade Dragons, and Awesome Jake dashing away will secure the objective for the Jade Dragons. And simply the presence of the Dragons enough to keep the Olympus Bolts at bay. We've crossed that 15-minute threshold, Myth, and the Olympus Bolts are 3K behind.
3K down, experience down as well. The Jade Dragons, pretty soon, I'm thinking in the next 4 or so minutes, we'll be able to group up as 5 and never ungroup. We're going to see them reset back to laning phase a couple more times, but we're very rapidly approaching the point where it's going to be a conversation about double Cthulhu. It's going to be a conversation about Pagon turning into Lasbra and being that initiator for his team. This Morgan is starting to get a lot more value as the game goes on. You can just start to see that Pagon is confident in his damage already, doesn't even look to build a whole lot more early. It's Magi's Blessing in the 3rd slot, contending with the Pluck from Awesome Jake or the Displacement from Lasbra, even maybe the Giddy Up from Ven, going to make it even harder now to shut down this Morgan, who has not used her relics as of yet. I think Beads and Aegis have been up for the entirety of this game. Now Magi's on top of it, means that there is just a whole lot of CC immunity. And considering Cthulhu is the transformation, that's just a whole lot of survivability available to Pagon. It's going to be very difficult. That one death, that could be the only death.
It might be. Jade Dragons would love it that way. Luckily for Ven, the pacing of the mid lane action has slowed down just a little bit, but Mike and Pagon send some damage towards the Tier 1. Already Tier 1 missing over on left, actually. All the remaining Tier 1s outside of the Jade Dragons mid, relatively low, and the Olympus Bolt solo lane. Lasbra has some climbing to do here. 3 levels behind Sanford Soccer, who on the Fenrir finally was shut down. I wonder if there's enough damage here. Haddix pretty tanky. And I think that's a good line for the Olympus Bolts to follow as well, and it's that Haddix has a slight lead over Fine OK. This Ardio still feels like she's pretty strong.
Yeah, she's the one that gets the bounty as well for Sanford Soccer, who's probably worth about 700 gold, so a massive infusion over to Haddix, which is the bulk of his lead, I believe. As PBM lines up against 2, should have some peel from Panda soon.
Could be a bait, though, here from Polar Bear Mike if the
That
Jade Dragons are able to rotate through Circle of Protection, rather. Delays out Mike, but slow on the rotation are the Jade Dragons, though. Awesome Jake has used his ultimate to confirm the kill. Here's the first Cthulhu. There's the second Cthulhu, and they are running down the back line, as you would expect. It's a disengaged pluck from Awesome Jake. But what are you supposed to do against this? Run, I suppose, is the best you can do.
It's working.
But the Jade Dragons don't have enough follow-up damage, and somehow the Olympus Bolts will keep themselves alive with half health on everyone.
Yeah, they go back to base. The Jade Dragons don't pull out the objective either. Panda Cat's alive. Your ADC's there. Sanford Soccer has got a whole lot of damage with Seething House. Surprised that the objective isn't on the minds of the Jade Dragons. And I think that fight goes so poorly for the Dragons, again, because of the slow rotation over to help out PBM. Panda Cat actually uses his leap to close gap into red buff. Then the pluck happens to PBM. So he's got to turn around and head the other way. Lost that mobility. Sanford Soccer essentially not even in that team fight whatsoever. And speaking of Sam, take a peek at his build. He's moving in towards a good deal of defense, I suppose relying on the additional power of Seething Howl to make up for that in the build. The Jade Dragons, though, may not have had eyes for the objective initially after that team fight, but now grouped up yet again will look towards the Oni. And, well, who's around to defend it? Nobody. It's Primal, by the way. It's not Oni.
Awesome Jake is close by. I'll let that one go by.
Thanks, man.
But then we're going to circle back to it. The Primal Fury.
Okay.
Jade Dragons goes over somewhat quietly after it is all said and done. That next rotation of ultimates is through. I mean, that was your team fight, right? That's what you expect from the Jade Dragons on cooldown for the rest of this game. Double Cthulhu walking through a sanctified field and the rest of the bolts running and hopefully having enough health to then turn around the fight on the other end of it. So that's what the Jade Dragons are hoping to continue doing, but with some more damage sticking as the game gets a little bit later on. Panda Cat, of course, going to have to supply a good bit of that. There's a nice gold lead for the Jade Dragons that is built up. Pyromancer will be up now in about a minute or so. And this is such unique territory where the bolts are, again, about 4,000 gold behind.
Let's call it 5.
I'll call it 5,000 gold behind, but you can't just like quietly let all of these objectives keep going down and down and down. It's such a unique spot where might feel like you have to fight for something here, or else the Jade Dragons will simply continue running away with this game.
And again, the Jade Dragons composition is only continually getting stronger as time goes on. As we're starting to approach those 5th tier items, 6th items as well, they're going to hit very significant power spikes. And that's not to say the Olympus bolts won't get stronger, but individual pieces start to fall off. Barracuda on this Olaron, that's your late game win condition. He's got 2 Cthulhus walking him down, which is possibly the worst counter matchup for Olaron in the game. Lasber on the Shiva loses out on relative strength as the game goes on because his ultimate will no longer be allowed to be channeled for damage. It's mostly about the healing and survivability. Displacement, to be sure, still a valuable asset to bring to your team, but disruption, I think, not quite enough from Shiva to make up for that lack of damage come late, as opposed to Sanford Soccer on this Fenrir, who has decided to move in towards a little bit of that utility. Genji's guard in that last pickup now also has a good deal of survivability thanks to the lifesteal in his kit, simultaneously maintaining a whole lot of damage and a phenomenal KD at 6, 1, and 2. The Jade Dragons in a very good position and take the Pyromancer with 0 opposition from the Olympus bolts. I think you're right that you can't allow these neutral objectives to go down for free. Pyromancer, I'm sure they're fine letting that one go, but 21 minutes in, it's time to start getting some eyes on that Fire Giant.
Now, Myth, a Cthulhu is normally dealt with by, Shred, right? Chin side's a fantastic item. That's not something Ven necessarily wants to build into.
Kind of has to.
But you have to. Look, he has abandoned whatever that next Morning Star tree item is.
Heartseeker.
And has immediately gone into the chin sides, realizing that 1 Cthulhu probably needs it anyway. But double Cthulhu, absolutely. So Ven has had to pivot what otherwise is just a straight ability build in order to get some health shred, and it is necessary. We'll see if Ven can make use of that and tilt some of these team fights back towards the Olympus bolts. Fire Giant pulled by the Dragons, but dropped. Imagine we'll see a little bit of this style of dancing where there's enough tankiness in the front line of the Jade Dragons where you can open up some space.
Yeah, the Olympus Bolts, Barracuda specifically, also picks up his own equivalent of kin size. Telkine's ring now finished, so HP shred is there for the Olympus Bolts, but how often is Olaron standing his ground against Cthulhu? It's going to be difficult to apply it.
We'll have to find out. Pagon transforms. Awesome Jake lurking in the water. Sam for Soccer brutalizes forward Ragnarok onto Bera. But Sam, being body blocked on his disengage, is able to get out. Eyes on Panda Cat. Desert Fury flies, but simply not enough damage from the Jade Dragons to finish off any of these kills. Now look at the bolts. They realize this fight could turn once the D-transformations are out. Circle protection. That'll heal up Final K and Panda Cat on the front of the fight. Meyer from the true Cthulhu traps down a couple members of the bolts, and somehow everyone on the map remains on the map.
PBM pretty low, has now been zoned out. Good stun from Haddix, we'll keep it around. Dispel Magic though. That HP shield should be enough to peel out the rest of the way. That's an early transformation from Pagon that might go punish now, as Pancat uses Impale just to peel for himself. It's the Olympus Bolts in great position, but pincered by the Jade Dragons.
What happened here? A teleport from Final Case. The answer dashes through everyone on the Olympus Bolts. And this is the initiation the Dragons are dreaming of. But is the damage there this time? Barracuda brought to the back line as Pagon wraps forward to the front of this fight. 3 members of the Bolts left running. Sam for Soccer will stay alive. Haddix desperately clinging to life, and life will drain. Pagon adds another, and the Jade Dragons snag 4 kills.
Idyllic situation for the Olympus Bolts to survive the initiation from the Jade Dragons. Double transformation from Cthulhu does not matter if you can't get a single kill. Does matter, though, if the Olympus Bolts chase out too far into the Jade Dragon side of the map. A phenomenal flank from the Dragons. Pincer's 5-man push from Cthulhu stops them in their tracks, and the Olympus Bolts have 20 seconds on the grayscale.
Let's see how fast this Phoenix goes.
If this goes down in the next 2 seconds, 1, 2.
Oh, it's right on the edge.
Oh, they're going for it.
They're going for it. Final K is tanky enough. Barracuda will have Sanctified Field. There's a Descent into Madness out, and Barracuda is time. There is no time. No time has run out, and Barracuda is deleted. The Jade Dragons have run over the Bolts from minute 1, and they will finalize it in minute 24. Jade Dragons take a 2-1 lead.
The Olympus Bolts, I think, can look towards that match and say, look, we lost in the early. We started at, what, 0-7? That's not going to happen every single time. Then just not allowed to play inside of his own tower. But credit all belongs to the Jade Dragons. Pagon gets the ball rolling early, and then Sam for Soccer picks it up and runs with it.
I'll admit, Myth, there were moments where in the double Cthulhu fights, I was worried
Yo, why is anybody dying?
Yeah, well, everyone's surviving.
What's going
Where's the
on?
damage? And then it just takes a good wrap around on the end there, and the Jade Dragon's able to push back everyone but Haddix by the end. That was the story all game long. Haddix.
Better get that in the replays.
Yeah, close to being. Actually,
We
no,
better.
Haddix dies earlier in that fight. What a fight from the Jade Dragons to take a 2-1 lead here in this set. Time to bounce back for the Bolts in game number 4, coming up after this break.
Dragons win game number 2. Convincing start, like a couple of speed bumps in the middle, and then they just kept going after that point. They slowed down, they pumped the brakes when necessary, but unfortunately for the Bolts, it was not enough to stop them entirely. Again, Gore, Trelly on the desk to break that one down, and Trelly, Vin wasn't allowed to play a majority of that game, and then when he was allowed to play, didn't make a big enough difference because of how ahead the Dragons were.
Yeah, let me walk you through a little bit of my mindset when I was drafting my fantasy team. I thought about Pagon, and I was like, you know what, this is a new rookie coming to the league, but I was like, I already know because I've seen him play. He has a lot of confidence. He is not scared to take those 1v1 engagements in mid, which not many mid laners go for. And he was able to put down Ven very early, just soloing him at level 5 because that's what the Morgan can do. And after that, it's hard to exist in the lane Sam for soccer on this Fenrir. You can't cancel out the Brutalize as a Chiron. You pretty much just have to eat the full brunt of that damage. And they were able to just pretty much run away. I mean, as you said, a few speed bumps, but besides that, just a farm fest, essentially.
Yeah, good stuns. And again, you get the lockdown, whether it's between Pagon or Sam. They did just make sure that Chiron was not very effective. And then you get the other portion of that. We just saw Pagon transform into the On-Her, but we got to see it from the actual On-Her as well. Just several plays where Panda Cat gets aggressive and ends up getting a lot of benefits from it, whether it's a kill or even a little bit more between the two of them. I think it was just a lot to handle for the Bolts. You can see there a couple of kills did end up eventually going the other way, but I'll look at how convincing the team fight is, and more specifically, look at Panda's health bar. He took a third there and was still free casting from the back, so feels really solid. 7-1 there for the Fenrir, 4-1-7 for Panda Cat. So a lot of good plays, and of course we have to mention, I think it must be just because of how this works, but Bara, if you threw out the Sanctified Fields, then Pagon or Fine OK or both could just become Pagon become Cthulhu, and then both of them just walk through the ability anyway. And so I think there was a lot that the Dragons did that just handled the draft from the Bolts really well.
Yeah, I would say game 1, we figured out pretty much immediately that Nox need to be taken away. Now that we're going on to game 4, it's got to be the Fenrir, right? I mean, the Fenrir has been so impactful. If the Bolts don't have first pick, I have to imagine they want to take that away. Sam for Soccer obviously has been having the hot hand, and you want to feed the hot hand no matter what. But right now, you try to throw off his groove or something because he has been looking so on point whenever he is able to come out with a lead. Obviously, Pagon on the Thoth, that was taken away as well. So we're adapting as the draft goes on, but right now it's do or die time for the Bolts. Fenrir and Thoth have to be on the forefront of their minds.
Yeah, something that they need to be just worried about, I think, immediately going into this. But that's where things get so muddied in the middle, is when you look towards picks and bans and you go, okay, so we need to be worried about the Fenrir. We need to be worried about the Thoth. Oh, man, that Athena jungle, that's definitely going to be devastating. Man, that Uller in the mid, that's 5 bans right there, and only 3 of them happen at the very beginning, even if you get the other 2. Then I would argue maybe the Dragons have goofed up, although that doesn't seem like it's affecting Bara too much. We go over there, and you would not believe that they had just lost, and Jake's just snacking.
Jake's fueling.
And the other 2 are at least 2, I can assume, maybe 3, are just joking and having fun. So the Bolts feeling fine.
I imagine this is sort of like when you were a kid in school and your teachers would bring out snacks before a big test. This is Jake trying to get some brain fuel, saying, "Hey, we're about to siege the comeback here. Let's think about picks and bans. I need some form of snack to get my creative juices flowing, and then we're gonna formulate some sort of draft to put a stop to this." So right away, trying to get Mike on something that lacks pressure. He's not even reaching in. He doesn't want to touch the snacks at all.
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually a huge fan of that technique of snack eating. It keeps your fingers mostly clean. And by mostly, I mean they should just stay clean because you're not touching any other, I guess those were goldfish, so probably salt? I guess generic goldfish residue.
Now we gotta know if they're flavor blasted because that'll just add another level.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? If you're eating something akin to, anything that has a powder on it, it's much easier to dump into the mouth as opposed to reach in and grab just because of the mess factor. And look, he's about to be touching a keyboard. Yeah, this is good tech from Jake here. We'll see if it remains good tech in the picks and bans. Athena banned out by the Bolts there. They first pick team one more time. And it could be the last time if the Dragons get their way. They have been on a tear the last 2 games. And that Athena gets answered with a Kleena. It does not necessarily get us any step closer to maybe what we were wondering earlier.
Well, I'm assuming the Jade Dragons take away Daji and Nox. And then the Bolts have a few different options because last time they first picked the Ardio, and I think Haddox is going to look good no matter what you put him on. So maybe prioritize this Fenrir because it's got to get through. There's no way the Jade Dragons ban it. They have to ban the Nox here. And the Bolts can say, hey, we picked the Fenrir. You can answer back. You can have the Ardio if you want. We still get Cthulhu. But it looks like the Bolts are going to ban Ardio, which throws a little bit of a different wrench in the plans because now, again, the Dragons, I have to assume it's Nox. They've already shown that they do not want to put Awesome Jake on this pick. But seeing as how good this Fenrir has been this set, do the Bolts first pick it? Ardio's not available anymore. I certainly think that's the play.
We have to imagine and act under the assumption that this is going to be a Nox ban because otherwise I know exactly what's going to happen. It's a Fenrir.
I was going to say they can't ban away
so
Fenrir
we have
because
to
of the Nox.
act and operate under the assumption that this is a Nox first pick for the Bolts. Right? Like, it feels like that just ends up, I think, shifting its priority. Fenrir, despite how well the Dragons just played it. And now here's a question for you.
Lay it on.
In a world where you have to ban Nox or Fenrir to feel confident, do you instead arbitrarily ban some other god, let both through, and then force the Bolts to decide? I guess at that point, I don't know if I've seen a lot of Nox from the Dragons, so if I'm the Bolts there, I'd grab the Fenrir, dare them to grab Nox, and if they don't, then you still get Nox, so maybe that's not worth it.
Well, the Bolts, the Bolts did their homework, and they did their brain fueling because Fenrir is not that great into Nox specifically. You're not going to find this level of success on Fenrir when Nox is still on the board, so as long as they banned accordingly, and the Jade Dragons recognize this, I'm guessing as well, because if you ban the Nox, they get the Fenrir, and there's no sort of counter. If you ban the Fenrir, they get the Nox, and now you get the Thoth pick, and it looks like also Gilgamesh. They sort of hovered Thoth and then switched to Gilgamesh. I have to imagine the Thoth goes through here as well, because Fenrir and Daji are great answers to Thoth, both taken away, but they're going to prioritize that E set, and now the Bolts get to answer back.
Now here's a fun conversation to have for both of these picks.
Okay.
Gilgamesh,
right?
0% win rate this weekend.
Yeah.
Not too great. 20% pick rate, so it's not in every game.
Right.
But he hadn't been doing well when he is there. E-set, either support or mid, but Nox has been acclaimed as the counter to her, notably by the Leviathans during the World Championship, because the Bolts were playing a lot of E-set. Jake locked it in. And then Wrong Yu played Nox and put them down in the dirt. Now they have the counter on their favor and the 100% win rate on it. So where are we going from here, Trelly? It feels like we're looking at Game 5 already, and there's only 3 picks here for Game number 4.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to matter where we go from here as long as they pick something that does damage, something that has peel, something that, like the quintessential. You could just say, hey, they picked a Hunter here, they could pick that, and I'd be pretty much on board. I will say you still have to pilot the Nox well, which Jake always has from what we've seen, so I'm not ready to just cross that one out. And we are going to see this Horus that has been banned away a few times now locked in as well, so in my head, this is the Jade Dragon's worst nightmare, right? Like, this is what they've been trying to take away, but given how good they've been looking, they had to have known this was coming, and they've got answers this time. Not going to be the Thoth that Pagon has looked so solid on. It's going to be the Hebo. Has a great matchup in a Nemesis. You can knock up that shield in pretty much just one shot. But if you are going to go for that Blink, which a lot of these Hebos like to go, and again, this isn't just a Pagon pick. We've seen Sanford Soccer on the Hebo multiple times as well. So we don't exactly know where this is going. The Gilgamesh still could be solo. There's a few different, picks that they're holding on to here, not exactly showing where it's going to go, but they have some avenues to fight back, despite the fact that the Bolts have gotten what looks like a dream draft.
Well, the Artemis gets stripped away, so some of the CC that we've gotten used to seeing from the Bolts, they're not going to have that banned out as well. Way back when, in Game number 2. Played in Game number 1. I'd say if you can remember that far back. For most people, that's not too difficult. But for me, for some reason, I have to have my notes in front of me in order to list it out there. Cthulhu is a ban by the Bolts. Olarun as well. So Barra taking a couple of shots, even though it maybe hadn't been as great last time. Especially with the Cthulhu off the board, that Sanctified Fields feels like it might do a little too much work, so the Dragons are cutting it.
Yeah, it seems like banning out Barra better option than banning out Ven here, because you don't really know what the matchup is going to be. Barracuda always has that safety, and Jingwei could very easily be picked for the Jade Dragons here, so they're able to answer back pretty much immediately if that's going to be the option. They don't really have to take that one away. The Bolts are going to ban away Odin, and I mean, Panicat looked good on the on her, but you're giving Barra Jingwei if you don't lock it in right here.
Well, that'll be a fun twist if we do get to see it. Yeah, the Jingwei, because it was banned last
Yeah,
time.
you got to take it.
I believe picked earlier on. So yeah, take it away, strip it down, and make it so that Barra can't play this god for the 104th, 5th, 6th time. Let's see. 105th time. So that's a lot. That's a lot of Jingwei. You have to imagine. So imagine a regular, like, blanket statement, like 28-minute game to factor in some of the late ones and some of the early ones. That's a lot of Jingwei over 100 times. It's 2,800 minutes, which comes out to insert in post. We can video edit this live, right? Yeah, put that. Make sure that the right number is right there. That's a lot of Jingwei for Barracuda. So. Luckily, we don't even have to fare with that. Instead, it's Panda Cat on that pick. Thoth and Izanami locked in for the Bolts. A fresh look for both of these. Iza hasn't been picked up at all this weekend.
Yeah, we haven't seen too much Iza, but given the fact that we've strayed away from the Crusher meta, Iza looks very solid, right? It's just one of those items that completely shuts down her stealth. Crusher into like a Medusa, for example, just there's no way you're ever escaping. You don't win that trade until late game, and the Shred just benefits you so much. And I see
I'm doing the myth.
Yeah, you're locked in here because you're starting to see where this draft is probably going. Because to me, that says Hebo in the jungle, Susanoo mid, Jingwei ADC, ESET support, and Fine OK on the Gilgamesh solo.
Yeah.
But there's a few different ways it could go as well.
There's a lot of different ways this could go.
But it's the Jade Dragons. I don't like to hedge my bets. I'm saying we know that Pagon likes the Susanoo mid, and he likes to solo Ven. He likes to attempt to fight Ven, I should say.
Well, here's where they lose me. And this is something we've seen Gilgamesh solo.
Right.
We've also had a ton of conversations about how it feels best in jungle.
Right.
But I don't see anything else that I want going solo up on that list outside. I mean, I guess technically there's some flexibility in maybe the ESET, but then you're talking about who's going support. It feels like a fun shuffle. But it feels like Fine OK is going to get that pick, which is a different look to the solo line.
I think because you're against the Horus, who is going to probably build the Golden Blade and just try to auto attack the wave. You're almost always going to out trade with the auto attacks. There's just a fair bit of CC you have to deal with because that's all really Horus is. It's great amount of movement, small bit of sustain, and then lockdown. That's pretty much what the kit provides. So you're going to have to worry out for that, but I was trying to say that right now, Pagon has a dream matchup because one thing Thoth does really well is outrange you. One thing Susanoo does really well is get to those mages that can't really escape, put the jet stream on them and say, go ahead, dash. I'm coming with you. And so I imagine that's probably what the thought process was here. Let's bait this Thoth pick out. We're not going to take it. You're not going to ban it clearly because you haven't banned it yet. And now Pagon gets to say, I'm going to try to deal with that. Now, there's a few avenues to juke out those abilities, of course, and Ven can just say, I'm going to keep you in combat so you never can blink, but the mid lane matchup is what I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, it should be a really fun one to watch just because, again, this Thoth is something I think we didn't see out of the Bolts at all yesterday and haven't seen for a little bit. So it'll be interesting to just see how that shakes out. But the Susanoo, we did see. Unfortunately for the Dragons, yesterday the Susanoo was a loss. In fact, now all I've done every time I've talked about where these picks are and what they have done in the past couple of weeks for either of these squads, outside of, well, maybe the Susanoo a couple of weeks, comes out even. At least this weekend, not quite so much. We'll see. Can the Dragons close things out right here, right now, or will the Bolts push us to game number 5? We have to stop it here.
Jade Dragons have drafted a composition that can push the envelope here. In game number 4, in the read of the desk is correct. Fine OK on Gilg solo, Sam on Hebo jungle, Pagon, Susanoo mid, and then PBM, of course, on the ESET support. Panda Cat will be playing the Jingwei. Myth, this is a composition that wants to get active.
It is. I'm keeping my eyes, and God, I hate how much I've been agreeing with Trelly today on the mid lane.
Why?
Because I
that
think
means he's doing his job well, and you're doing your job well.
Well, no, he's doing his job well, and I'm copying him.
Oh, so you're worried about the copying aspect, not the fact that it's Trelly that you're agreeing with. You just hate copying. It could be anyone that you're copying. You would hate it.
No.
Oh, specifically.
Yeah, specifically Trelly and Aggro and Hindu Man.
Okay.
All my coworkers, really. I'll copy anybody else, though.
I'm a coworker.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Miff. Sorry, I derailed you. You were making a very good point about agreeing with Trelly on something.
Yeah, if action is going to happen in this game, I think it is going to be in mid. Specifically, Pagon has had some experience in the Susanoo versus Thoth matchup in mid this year and has gotten first blood. The majority of the times he's been able to line that up, has gotten first blood or at least gotten a solo kill up against Ven every single game so far this set. So it feels almost inevitable that it could happen again, or maybe a return the other way. Ven's going to be expecting it. No way it happens to him 4 times in a row.
Oh, you've doomed him now, man. Well, how's your caster curse feeling today? You feeling strong on your caster curse or no?
I don't think that I have a caster's curse. I think it's more so that I predict.
Right, okay, so...
I'm like a Nostradamus figure.
So you don't think that... You're like an MC Hammer style guy.
What?
You're an MC Escher. You can't touch this.
Paintings? Oh, I see.
Right.
I see.
They were calling back to that one again. Uh-oh, is it going to happen to Pagon here, though, in Game 4? Damage will. But Venenu will be able to dash away and receive some assistance from the jungler on some early pressure there. Sanford Soccer on the Hebo. I think it's going to be a fun thread to follow this game, Miff. A very Sanford Soccer-esque pick, right? Where it's a jungle-style pick that not many are playing. Oh,
no way, bro!
Come on! It's unbelievable! It's happened 4 games in a row! The taunts! It's 4 games in a row, and you know why? I told him out in the lobby, you gotta start taunting, man. You gotta start throwing some down. I told him to.
He did it for you!
And he said, Dave, I did it in Game 3. We missed it. We didn't miss it this time. Pagon is relentless. That is absurd. That is unheard of.
Imagine the mental damage as well. Like, if you're Ven, you have to come to terms with the fact that you got soloed every single game in the finals.
Do you think...
That was a 2v1. It was a 2v1 last time, too.
And it happened last time also. And he lives again.
God.
Do you think Mike meant it when he said Pagon's the best player on this team?
All right, to peel back the veil a little bit, we got the chance to sit down with Mike for a moment as he was rehydrating, flexing as he does. Those are the only 2 things he does do: flex
Sounds
and
a lot
hydrate.
like me.
And he said Pagon is the best Smite player on the Jade Dragons. And I asked him, do you mean mechanically? And he's like, yeah, I suppose so. He'll probably get there competitively one of these days, but he's so new to it. He's such a young guy.
You're not sensing any of that Mike level of like sarcasm. Like you're sensing this is a serious answer.
I think he's being legitimate.
Yeah. Look, Pagon has been playing like it this set, right? I mean, when you
4 solo kills, 2v1.
Yeah, 4 solo kills, 2 of them in a 2 versus 1 in mid. Though now, and I'm not taking an ounce away from Pagon here.
Please don't.
I would argue expected that there could be an opportunity when you're playing Susano into Thoth. If we're going to agree with Trelly a little bit more.
Yeah, I was thinking like at level 5 though.
Okay, sure. He struck gold before we expected Pagon to be able to do so. However, we expected this lane to be threatening for Ven maybe from level 5 onward. Pagon just got super aggressive maybe before Ven was prepared for it.
Yeah, that is exactly what happens, and if you're not prepared, you get caught out. Ven falls down for first blood yet again, and the Jade Dragons this time have established a lead on the map without having to kill 9 people first. It's 1-0, Jade Dragons up. 1,000 gold, experience starting to be reflected there as well. Sanford Soccer hasn't had to rotate in as much as we've seen from Lasbro, spend a little bit more time in the jungle farming, has ticked over to level 5 first.
Venenu. Look, yeah, you're hanging out underneath your tier 1 tower, right?
Yeah, surely I'm safe.
Surely you're safe, but there's a blink on Sam and a blink on Pagon. Think about that as this game goes on. The sheer amounts of damage that 1-2 punch is going to be able to do, if not Aegis out, and nobody's got Aegis right now. The crushing wave, Typhoon, all of the damage connecting. You shouldn't lose any objectives this game. If you're looking at ultimates, if you're the Jade Dragons. I suppose Dark Portal, although Dark Portal and Final Judgment could keep things interesting. But when you got Crushing Wave and Circle Protection.
Mitigated success from Circle Protection because of Lono's mass, 15% less damage.
Yeah, fair enough. All right.
Thoth ultimate, so long range.
Because we haven't really analyzed the Bolt draft yet. Haddix has really enjoyed
You have
this.
to call me out.
No, we. Okay, fine. I haven't brought up the Bolts draft yet. That's entirely my fault. None of it's on Miff. You're a perfect angel and have done nothing wrong.
Do you mean that?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, wow.
And the Olympus Bolts have given Haddix back his Horus solo. Always have to go Golden Blade or else you're going to get out cleared, as maybe he is anyway. And so maybe you're looking towards later game, team fighty style rotations from Haddix when he can start to make an impact on this game.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be in this laning phase, I'll tell you that much. He doesn't want to line up against Finoke. And, you know, we've had a lot of time to discuss the merits of Gilgamesh in solo as opposed to Gilgamesh in the jungle. I've made a broad sweeping statement, as I'm so apt to do. I think Gilgamesh, by and large, always better in the jungle because he lacks in wave clear. But up against a Horus, even with Golden Blade, Finoke might have as good, if not better, clear.
Mike, under a Little threat here. Final Judgment. Doesn't connect to Lasbra, though, in range. Circle protection down. I wondered if Pagon was going to go in on that. Polar Bear Mike takes a few ultimates, and a couple ultimates return from the Jade Dragon. So neither here nor there, though I suppose the Obelisk now in favor of the Jade Dragons. How about this build path from Sanford Soccer? He has gone Book of Thoth.
He's playing it slow.
First item out of the jungle. And you get the idea, Miff, that that's maybe a slow play style of itemization, though Polar Bear Mike is going to have to speed things up to get away from Barracuda, which he will be able to do so.
Yeah, Dark Portal not expended. Barracuda doesn't love his odds in the fight.
Oh, we're
Pagon, not great odds here either.
No, can we make reparations for our mid laner? No, we can't. Pagon will
Still
live
alive?
and backsteps the Dark Portal and takes some autos from Barracuda to get it done. But Barracuda will pay for it with his life. Awesome Jake avoids the stun. And the Jade Dragons able to escape a 1-for-2 trade for the Jade Dragons. Though Haddock's around the back on Horus. Snags the stun onto Polar Bear Mike, and now Awesome Jake has grabbed a kill, but Final K is rotated through as well. Up, down, won't connect onto Ben, and actually might turn around to kill onto Final K if he's not able to get out of this one. There will be a knock-up and some water hands from Sanford Soccer, and this one ends at a 2-for-2.
That's great for the Olympus Bolts. Anything they can pull back in their favor, anytime they could shut down Pagon and slow down his farm, that is massive for the Olympus Bolts. Ven now only one level down. Pagon soloing out the jungler's farm. If I'm Sanford Soccer, I'm throwing a massive fit. Luckily, though, Sanford Soccer about an entire level up. Lasbra just now ticking to 8. Sanford Soccer ticking to 9, so I suppose just fine in splitting some of that farm. Pagon maintains a pretty decent lead. And it's early rotations from the Soul Laners, yet again, that is the difference maker in this fight, maybe favoring Haddox.
Final K drops down the Winds of Shamash. Drop kick is great, and the damage not quite there for the Bolts, though. The kill does roll through.
Sam's on the way.
And effectively traded out aggro. Saves one kill. Lasbra, oh no, he gets his back stopped by the minions. Sanford Soccer doesn't have blink, but does have knockup and does have water carpet.
No.
Pagon does it again! Twice in the same game! As Pagon puts down Ven once more.
2v1 again.
And 2v1, I suppose, yet again, and dodges out the ultimate.
And takes the
from
red.
Awesome Jake. Red buff drops down. Mid lane is a graveyard. The Jade Dragons, Pagon, I mean, able to add another one to his highlight reel for this set.
Pagon is just a menace. Like, yes, it's a counter matchup. Yes, Pagon is always drafting for it. Yes, that's how the Jade Dragons decide to approach their compositions, but it is just speaking volumes to the level of play of Pagon that even against these top-tier players, that's Venenu. That's not some random guy in a ranked game.
Then.
That is a world champion MVP who has been soloed, what, 5 times now in 4 games, 3 of which in a 2v1, once now in his own red buff. This is massive from the Jade Dragons, massive from the rookie Pagon.
Look, Pagon, he hates doing post-game interviews. He's not doing himself any favors.
He also hates Ven, it would seem.
Apparently. Anyone he goes up against in the middle, he's not doing himself any favors. Like, if you're going to keep playing like this, we're going to have to talk to you at some point, Pagon.
Yeah, play worse.
Yeah, play worse if you don't want to do post-game interviews. Because right now, it's looking like a pretty obvious choice. If this result holds, it's a 2-level differential in mid. 1 over in ADC for Barracuda, 1 in the jungle. Good news for the Bolts. Just few and far between here in Game 4 is that Haddox is 1 level up over Final K. So there are some avenues back in, but a bit over the horizon to get there. And unfortunately right now, Miff, it is the artillery mage that at this point in the game, you want maybe a couple items in to sit back and just slam damage has just been kept back from minute 1.
Yeah, no matter how far away you are, it seems Pagon will find you in the back line.
Man, Trelly said that.
We're starting to get to that 10-minute mark where the objective, I'm going to ignore the fact that I'm, again, copying Charlie's homework, where objectives start to be the name of the game. And you said it earlier, great confirmation from the Jade Dragons. Good damage from Ven there on a Pagon, showing that Thoth still has the potential to fight back. Divine Ruin already finished up. But the Jade Dragons, with Crushing Wave, with Circle Protection, with Typhoon, should start looking towards these objectives very shortly, and they can play through either the Pyromancer or the Gold Fury. Final K slightly behind in XP, but still has a whole lot of auto attack damage, which is exactly what you need to burn down these objectives. So even just Sam and Fine together might be able to do Pyro.
Awesome Jake, call it overextended, but he's just fine with where he's at. Look to the obelisk there for just a moment. You're right, though, Myth. Gold Fury now out, but the Jade Dragons, unlike game number 3, working into this part of the game with a slight gold lead. Remember, it was constant fighting back, despite how snowbally game 3 ended up getting. The Bolts consistently were holding a 1,000 or so gold lead and then would build it back up.
Sick blink.
That was nuts from Sanford Soccer. Exchanges sides with Haddix, who also blinked. And Sam will live. A small moment that ultimately is pretty cool. But the Jade Dragons this time, they're not far and away, but pretty comfortably ahead of the Olympus Bolts and show no signs of slowing things down, though. This could be rough for Fine OK. Lasbro over towards right. Value out of the Nemesis ultimate, and there is a kill for the Olympus Bolts. Needed it. And that's feeding the hot hand, giving Haddix more pressure over on right.
Yeah, Fine OK wishing he hadn't used his leap aggressively there. Now it's the Olympus Bolts looking at the neutral objective, and all that confirmation we had sung the praises of for the Jade Dragons is matched by the Olympus Bolts. As long as Ven's around, it's a coin toss.
Pyromancer taken low, but Jade Dragon, yeah, they just do it. They just do it. They have the circular protection down, crushing wave out from Sanford Soccer. Pagon sends the Typhoon over the wall, just short. No more kills will happen. See, to me, or to Mike rather, that's simple. Drop the circle of protection, detonate it, walk away. But Myth, you're feeling like maybe the Bolts could have done more.
Yeah, use some abilities, step up, zone, don't let PBM charge up the ultimate. It's not like PBM walked up and instant pop circle protection to steal it away. PBM walked up, pulled Pyromancer, dropped circle protection, charged it up a little bit, had Sanford Soccer throw out some auto attacks, and then confirm it. And that's a Lono's Mask E-set already. That's not unmitigated damage. That's 15% less than what you could expect normally. Just feels like the Olympus Bolts, with Final Judgment, or even like a silent slice and dice, should have been able to match what the Jade Dragons brought there. The Bolts do 90% of the work. I'm sorry, I have to pause. As maybe it's a 2v1, but that hasn't stopped him before. Pagon will let this one go.
Yeah, right.
Just feel like the Olympus Bolts could have done a little bit more around that Pyro to dissuade them.
I mean, if I'm giving them being the Bolts some credit, you know, potentially you're assuming a fight from the Dragons is over the horizon. But maybe the moment you see that circle protection go onto the Pyro,
it's like a Pavlovian response.
Right.
You've been conditioned.
Right, to assume that the Dragons want to fight. So maybe you're waiting for the shoe to drop and just see what happens. And unfortunately, the circle protection just detonates around the Pyromancer. I suppose luckily for the Bolts, I mean, Pyromancer always feels great, right? But it's not going to end this game any quicker or shorter than maybe it was a moment ago. It's just more control that the Jade Dragons have over the map, a little extra gold for everyone. As Panda Cat has, you know, found pressure, a couple of assists for Panda, but the one-level lead for the Jingwei over the Izanami, who you'd imagine would have some lane pressure. That is something we need to talk about, Myth. I think later on in this game, Barracuda is going to get to a point. Looks like just one tier of an item behind Panda Cat. I mean, Izanami late game is nothing to scoff at, but neither is Jingwei's. Feels like could have a good duel out of the Hunter role.
Yeah, I feel like Jingwei might outscale come late just because explosive bolts gives you a little bit of additional crit. Speaking of, Panda Cat getting active deep in the jungle.
Oh, but it's Pagon who's here. Beads used from Barracuda. Purple buff finally secured by the Jade Dragons. And another buff on the map ends up getting taken away. Gold Fury up. This would be a big one. I mean, Pyromancer, impactful of course, but losing this Gold Fury while you're already just shy of 4,000 gold down, 14 minutes. Could put the Jade Dragons on easy street towards the end. How about that from Mike? Triple silence, triple stun. E-set getting every ounce of value that you would want. Haddix is left alone, has to use the beads. Typhoon will follow him up, and the double pull from Pagon. And the Jade Dragons continue to play around their mid laner, and it continues to pay off. Another reinitiation from Mike, and another team fight from the Jade Dragons. Does not look particularly close. The Olympus Bolts lose 3.
Pagon comes up massive yet again in a team fight. Two-man Typhoon, two-man pool, sets up for the entirety of the fight after that, disengages, and that's before, or after rather, he'd already expended Blink, trying to solo out Barracuda in the duo lane. Now the Jade Dragons able to fall back to the objective and not concern themselves with any sort of steal. Sure, the Olympus Bolts composition is capable of matching the damage output of the Jade Dragons, but simply not the case if you don't have the numbers, the lives, or the cooldowns. Ven, still alive, certainly could not walk in there. The Jade Dragons push their lead even further, and do my eyes deceive me?
Is it 7K already?
Your eyes do not deceive you, Miff. They do. It's 7.3K.
Okay, man.
And nearly 10,000 experience. And that's what I meant when I said if the Gold Fury goes the way of the Dragons, it might get out of control. But when the Gold Fury and 3 kills go to the Jade Dragons, I didn't even imagine it getting that drastic here 16 minutes into the game. If we got to play hopeful for the Olympus Bolts, it's what? Pausing the game and farming up, and I don't mean literally pausing. I don't mean F10. I mean farming as best as you can for 15 minutes, hoping you don't lose too much of your base in the meantime.
Well, that's seemed to be a foregone
that it?
conclusion.
I mean,
tier 1 tower falls down. I mean, that is the answer, right? The Olympus Bolts
Can they
don't
do
want to take
anything?
a team fight as of now. I mean, then maybe objective steals could be the name of the game, playing around picks, superior rotation around Haddix. There are ways back in, but it's a long shot now. The Jade Dragons have got a pretty solid hold on this game.
Wow,
Pagon's surrounded.
Pagon has drawn the attention of 3 members of the Olympus Bolts to this left side of the
Barra
map.
doesn't know. Barra doesn't know where he is.
Can Pagon get a kill before he dies off? Pagon blinks over the wall, takes the ultimate from Lasbra. Barracuda dashes forward, Dark Portal down. Pagon gets the knockup.
Jake's
but
got
he's
him,
going to have
right?
awesome Jake around the back. Beads out from Pagon, clap from Lasbra, and there is the kill finally from the Jade Dragons. And it is a Pyromancer pull from the rest of the Jade Dragons and confirmation. Pagon attempting to find a kill onto Barra, but was able to pull the eyes of the Bolts. I thought maybe there was an opening
Watch out.
for a Fire Giant pull with that many members of the Bolts on left, but not to be.
Awesome Jake stunned out. Barracuda similarly in a bad position. 2v1s across the board. Make that a 4v1 in the tier 1. Unneeded Panda Cat. Credit for the kill here. And that's just the Olympus Bolt sticking around for a little too long in this team fight. He could have disengaged a little bit earlier. You got to be cognizant of the fact that even though Pyromancer falls down, it's so simple for this Jingwei to head back to base and fly her way back in. It's not just a tier 1. It's not just Barracuda's life. A tier 2 as well. A valuable trade. Pagon's life for 2 towers, a kill, and a Pyromancer. I'm sure the Dragons would take that trade every single day of the week.
Jade Dragons have woken up since a Game 1 stumble up against the Bolts. And remember, that's a Game 1 that the Jade Dragons might feel like they could have won as well. There was a nice little lead for the Dragons
Again?
at that point. Is it going to happen again? Pagon, a bit of a returning of the favor now as Pagon.
That's karma.
2v1. Although no solo kills have made their way to Pagon, but the Bolts, tired of what Pagon was doing, now send some damage his way. And at least are slowing things down. We said if you want to do something, you got to slow things down, and getting some kills onto Pagon is helpful.
I'm looking at Sanford Soccer's build right now. That's a massive mana stack. Maybe a Book of the Dead. That would be
interesting.
Super annoying because you've got damage mitigation from PBM, peel potential in frontline from Fine OK, and then all of a sudden the main weakness, one of the main weaknesses of Habois being that you have to ult towards an enemy to deal the damage with Crushing Wave. Generally, you're out of position immediately afterward. Doesn't matter if 80% of your HP is returned in shield form.
That's true. It would be a unique build, but also a fun build. Final Judgment channeled from Fen, no good. Sanford Soccer dodges that one out. Barracuda avoided death a moment ago. Now maybe able to get some damage onto a tier 1 tower, but Fine OK is going to chase this kill down and get it nonetheless. And chuckles from Barracuda is about the best that he can do at this point in the game, as the Jade Dragons will add another one. At what point, though, do the Dragons just pull the FG? Because they are running over the Bolts.
I think like now.
In every other lane.
He's dead for 40 seconds.
Right, for 40 seconds. And I think with the direction of the player icons, the Jade Dragons might be thinking the same.
Pagon heads back to base. It takes about 10 seconds to walk from base to Fire Giant, so maybe still some potential
I could do it in
to
5.
take the fight. Could you?
You were right, by the way. Book of the Dead for Sanford Soccer.
It's such a gross build, man. And Sanford Soccer has not been under threat. He has not been threatened this game. He didn't build defense because he felt like he was getting targeted. Instead, he just said, hey, I want to be able to frontline a little bit more so, and will be capable of doing it. Fire Giant pulled by the Jade Dragons, burning slowly. 2 members of the Olympus Bolts zoned out by Sam and Mike.
And just now, it's a respawn. Haddix could make a miracle play, but immediately off of the FG goes.
Where'd he go?
Then Lasbra heads back to base, trade spots with his ADC. Pagon alone in the back line, but that's how he likes it. And he'll get some damage onto Venenu. Sanford Soccer forward, has Crushing Wave, and he'll use it. Ticks down some damage on 2, but had the important damage onto Ven. Jade Dragons now get the FG, and a couple of kills onto the bolts.
Yeah, long time on
When did
Ben's
they do the
respawn,
FG?
40 seconds. I think it was a
While they were-
disengage from Panda Cat,
Yeah.
airstrikes away, and then the rest of the Olympus Bolts decided to chase out the fight, and Panda Cat just lands back down, Twinkle Toes floats back down to Earth, and takes out the objective. Now the Tier 2 tower in mid, potentially the Phoenix immediately afterward, and we are still 20 seconds away
Potentially
from Ben
the game
respawning.
after that.
If they get a pick.
They get a pick. There might be one onto Awesome Jake. There's plenty of
fine.
CC. Mid lane Phoenix gone. Jade Dragons, they
Just
got a
walking
pick.
in.
It's on to Ven, who's 10 seconds away from respawning. This has been a rout from minute one, though the Jade Dragons now backpedaling away. How far forward do the Olympus Bolts walk? Dark
Horus.
portal down, out goes Lasbra. Pagon, of course, trying to chase. Gets a double pull, drop kick onto Haddix. Polar Bear Mike has a stun onto Venenu. Final K reinitiates with a jump of his own. Final Judgment silenced out by Mike, and it looks like the Jade Dragons have filled their hunger, and we'll try to end in a moment.
Haddix getting a little over-aggressive. The Jade Dragons already on the retreat. That's all you need as an Olympus Bolts player, is for them to leave your Titan alone. Haddix wants a little bit more, bolts out, nobody follows him, and he dies alone in the back line of the Jade Dragons, who are now sitting on a 14,000 gold lead. Map state all in their favor. Mid Phoenix down. Titan's already taken a bit of damage. Primal Fury going to push their lead even further, and a lot of that gold, a lot of that lead still resides in the pockets of the Chaos team, so the Jade Dragons will be much stronger when they decide to continue their siege. That said, the Olympus Bolts have got some assets they can lean on in a defensive situation. Specifically, Ven should be able to keep these minion waves at bay with relative ease. Thoth having such a long range could apply some poke to the back line of the Jade Dragons. Sanford Soccer very survivable, but all of his defense being physical means that Ven has got a pretty decent target in him. Pagon going to struggle a little bit more so to get into the back line and play this wild, aggressive style when you're inside of a Phoenix. So the Olympus Bolts have got potential to build to mount a defense in their own Phoenixes. Tier 2 tower on the right-hand side. Let that one go. The Jade Dragons lead so large. It's like, what's $10,000 to a millionaire? Literally nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Let that go.
Yeah, I'm not stopping to pick up $10,000 if I
I drop it.
Yeah, right. Panda Cat, maybe a little defense on the end of his build here, sensing that the incoming magic damage is enough of a threat. As the Fire Giant still has 1 minute and 15 seconds left. The Jade Dragon slowed things down, but the Olympus Bolts slow on the response on the right side. Phoenix goes down so quickly. Jade Dragons could look for a fight here. Of course, why wouldn't they when the Jade Dragons are as far ahead as they are? Final K shrugs off the initiation, drop kicks one away. Winds of Shamash separate the opening part of this fight. Final K's in the back line. The health bar of Lasbra is gone. The Jade Dragons from minute one behind their new mid laner roll over the Bolts, and they will secure first seed.
Slight stumbles at points, but the Jade Dragons were always in control of the last game. That is a dominant performance from your top seed, your number one. So that's the expectation. The Olympus Bolts try their best, and this mic just does not agree with me. I'm going to do the thing I
What
did
about the
last
mic
time.
behind the camera? Do you think he agrees with you?
Mike?
Yeah, do you think that mic agrees
Yeah,
with you?
he's smiling. He got a thumbs
Do
up.
you agree with Miff?
Here, look, it doesn't even look like I'm holding a cord.
He doesn't agree with you, Miff. Neither of the mics agree with you.
Okay.
There's something about the Jade Dragons. If I'm remembering correctly, did they win Phase 1 playoffs in Season
Phase
8?
1 just about every single time.
And then I think at the time Ghost Gaming won Phase 1 in Season 7.
Quick
Something about
starters.
this team starting off well. The Jade Dragons first seed going into Masters with a 3-1 win over the Bolts. We will take a break, and the desk will take us home.
Jade Dragons stand on top today, and they do so in a pretty convincing fashion. Game 1 doesn't quite go the way they wanted, but games 2, 3, and 4 all seem to be just completely on their side. Trelly again on the desk with me, and that one, once again, it feels like there's a lot of potential for the Bolts throughout that game, to the point where I'm almost betting on them when going into this, right? Just because of some win rates that are on their side.
Right.
It's the first Nox support loss this team has had. And unfortunately for them, the Dragons just kind of kick things almost immediately into gear.
All right, so to me, they were playing 4D chess, right?
Okay.
So they start off, Pagon has a fantastic game on Thoth. 2 fantastic games on Thoth. They say, hey, we have to ban away this Thoth, right? We have to. And then they're like, hey, we're going to leave the Thoth open. We're going to bait you into getting your Nox. Then you put Ven on this Thoth pick, and then Pagon locks in this. I'm not going to say a complete counter, but there's really nothing that Thoth ever does to Susano. The root is just not enough peel. And then you're able to put this Thoth so far behind that he's vastly ineffective. So for me, they were cocking this up since like game number 1. They knew this was coming.
And it's going to be fun to watch. And again, so get ready for just Pagon highlights, by the way, because that's pretty much what this is going to be. Too many times, whether credit for the kill happened or not, Pagon was involved throughout the entire duration of the game, and it ended up working out well, whether it was for counter plays like that one, or if it was just set up for the team. Either way, again, this is something that the Dragons, I think, now have maybe over every other team, and it's just such a versatile mid-lane player. The God pool there has made this a lot more interesting to try and limit, because how do you ban out 1, 7 different gods in mid? You can't. And 2, that while limiting Sam, Fine OK, PBM, and PandaCat, it just feels like they finally hit that power team stance. Maybe not super team. I don't think that's the term I would use for this. Just but powerful is how I would describe them.
Right, because again, you try to ban these picks away, then you get the opportunity to pick them for yourself. You say, hey, this Thoth was so effective, let's try to take that away, and then you pick yourself right into that matchup where, again, I feel like there's really nothing that you can do unless you try to keep the Susanoo in combat with your 1, and even then, there's some room for outplay there. So just very smart picks and bans, and then just great play by them.
Well, they were joking about it in the cast. Specifically, I think was said was, if you want to stop getting pulled for post-game interviews, then you have to stop doing so well. Luckily, it looks like there's 2 guys that are standing off to my right. We got PBM and Pagon. And so I'll bounce between you just to allow you both a little bit. Okay, never mind. Mike wants me specifically to ask Pagon. I'm actually going to ask you, Pagon, just first. What's going on in mid, man? Because it seems to be that things are going smooth for you.
I don't know. He just can't handle it. Like, you shouldn't be stepping up. I don't know.
And it's just that simple. You just shouldn't be stepping up. Mike, I'll ask you, though, game 1 doesn't exactly go the way you guys would have wanted, a little bit of a loss. What was the slip up there, and what were the adjustments to turn that around?
At the end of the game, I said we can first pick Fender and they lose. Then we first pick Fender and they lost.
So smart.
Just double checking, it did work out that way. Actually, it was factual, not allegedly like we were talking about yesterday. Yep. This one did work, and eventually you end up forcing things to get banned out. The Fenrir works well for you in games 2 and 3, and then you go away from that towards the very end. Gets banned out by you guys to let them have the Nox. Was that something that you guys had kind of formulated? I mean, this Nox up to this point has been 100% win rate for the Bolts.
We just didn't care what they picked there because they left Thoth open and Daniel first blooded Ven every game, so we were just thinking, like, they can do whatever they want. They just, like, Ven can't hang with them. It's wraps,
Yeah, no, I mean, Pagon, like, I think Dave had mentioned it.
With all due respect. With all due respect.
Had said that he asked you to taunt.
Yeah.
Your reply had been, I did last game, and then you did it again anyway, just for him, right?
Just for him, of course.
Well, it was a good set to watch, guys. Again, congratulations on the win. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
The double thumbs up. That's what we get from Mike, and I'm feeling it, man. They're going in as first seed. I probably could have asked him a question about Masters, realizing that a little bit too late. Headsets are off. Mike screamed free.
Yep.
And they're going to run away. And that is what they were playing for, Trelly.
Right.
We're looking at this 2-day seeding tournament. Of course, we can look at what this bracket was, what we saw this weekend, just the top 4 teams in the SPL playing. And of course, if you were wondering, what were they playing for? I believe there was a little bit of cash prizing attached to this one, but primarily seeding for Masters, now in order. Dragons, Bolts, Warriors, then Titans are your top 4 seeds. And they will be getting that seeding not just for Masters, but that is going to be your top 4 SBL teams going into Phase 2 as well. So all of the scheduling and things like that are going to change just for that. It's still going to be double round robin, so they're still going to have to play everybody. It just affects when they'll play them throughout the phase and keeps things interesting. Masters, for those of you wondering, is just for cash. So even if you get first there, you're going to get the money. Doesn't mean anything for Phase 2, though, outside of the fact that you'll be a little richer for Phase 2, which does still feel pretty good. But Charlie, we're about to go into it now. It's a few weeks away. We're May 1st, and 18 days on the 19th, for those of you who can't do math. That will be a Thursday, and Masters will kick off. 4 NA SCC teams, 4 EU SCC teams, 8 SBL teams, all thrown into the bracket, 2 weeks. I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you. I've run into a lot of issues describing how it works, but essentially, it will be a double elim, right? Essentially, you have to lose twice. There's a lot of games. I'm going to tell you that now. From kickoff to the end, it is going to be a lot. But how do you feel, knowing, first off, we got a little bit of a break for it, but looking forward towards Masters?
I think that there's going to be definitely some upsets. Obviously, the Jade Dragons looked really good tonight. They're definitely going to be looking good to continue, but some of these SCC teams, I think they might surprise us. We're going to be very excited to watch them play as well.
Yeah, if I remember the schedule, if you're a Bolts fan or a Dragons fan, you won't be seeing them till the 27th. That's what this tournament just afforded them. They got a long time to prepare and a lot of SMITE to watch. Masters, again, that is the 19th of May. Make sure you tune in right here. Follow us on social and make sure that you get there on time. But for myself, from Charlie, from everyone in production, I want to say thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you at Masters.